문화예술교육진흥원 국제교류팀의 김소연 팀장입니다. 먼저 바쁘신 와중에도 시간을 내어 함께해 주셔서 너무 감사 말씀드리고요. 오늘 포럼은 현장에 와 계신 분들뿐만 아니라 유튜브 채널로 생중계되고 있습니다. 유튜브 채널을 통해서 시청해 주시고 계시는 모든 분들께도 진심으로 감사의 말씀드립니다. 문화체육관광부가 주최하고 한국문화예술교육진흥원이 주관하는 이번 2024 문화예술 국제포럼은 1일차인 어제 균등한 접근성을 보장하는 문화예술 교육, 2일차인 오늘은 미래 세대를 위한 문화예술 교육 실천과 현장 강화를 주제로 이곳에서 진행됩니다. 오늘 국제포럼 시작에 앞서서 한국문화예술교육진흥원 박은실 원장님의 환영 말씀을 듣겠는데요. 박은실 원장님을 무대로 모시겠습니다. 큰 박수로 부탁드립니다.
안녕하십니까. 한국문화예술교육진흥원장 박은실입니다. 너무 아름다운 5월에 이렇게 또 우리가 이렇게 아름다운 공간에서 포럼을 진행하게 되었습니다. 세계문화예술교육주간을 맞이해서 이틀간 열리는 2024 문화예술교육 국제포럼에 참가해 주신 여러분 진심으로 환영합니다. 어제 첫 번째 날에는 균등한 접근성을 보장하는 문화예술 교육이라는 주제로 핀란드, 몽골 그리고 한국의 문화예술 전문가들이 모여서 문화예술 교육 전문가들이 모여서 깊은 고견을 나누었습니다. 두 번째 날인 오늘은 보다 현장과 실천 사례에 집중하고 주제는 미래 세대를 향한 문화예술 교육 실천과 현장의 강화입니다. 미래를 이끌어갈 아동 청소년이 더 이상 교육 참여자와 교육 대상자가 아니라 그들이 주도하는 그런 미래 세대를 위해서 주목받고 있습니다. 우리가 이제 현장에 있어서 가장 중요한 주제 또한 전문 인력 양성과 관련한 것입니다. 오늘 연사들은 외국에서 많이 와주셨습니다. 미국의 케네디 센터 부대표 조던 라살, 그리고 독일의 피나바우시 센터 예술 프로젝트의 총괄 베티나 밀즈, 또 하버드 교육대학원의 프로젝트 제로의 예술놀이 프로젝트의 총괄 루이자 펜볼트 씨의 영상 발표가 있을 예정이고요. 미국 미디어 예술교육협회 대표이자 CEO인 데인 올슨 씨의 발표도 기대해 주시기 바랍니다. 나아가서 한국문화예술교육진흥원 김재순 학교예술 본부장의 발표를 비롯해서 오늘 토론을 이끌어 주실 김선아 한양대학교 교수님께도 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 그 외에 모든 관계자분들 함께 포럼을 만들어주고 계시는 문화체육관광부 교육과 관계자분들께도 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 오늘 이틀간 나온 포럼에서 나온 그 얘기들을 전문가들의 발제와 토론 그리고 아이디어를 면밀히 살펴서 양질의 교육 콘텐츠를 발굴하고 국제 간 공조를 확대해 나가는데 더욱 힘을 매진하겠습니다. 바쁘신 일정에도 불구하고 오늘 포럼을 위해서 이렇게 많이 와주셔서 감사를 드리고요. 앞으로도 더욱더 깊은 관심과 다양한 교류의 장을 마련하도록 애쓰겠습니다. 여러분 모두 감사드립니다. 감사합니다.
환영사를 해주신 한국문화예술교육진흥원 박은실 원장님께 다시 한번 큰 박수 부탁드립니다. 박은실 원장님께서 말씀해 주신 것처럼 문화예술교육 국제포럼 1일차인 오늘은 미래 세대를 위한 문화예술교육 실천과 현장의 강화를 주제로 미국, 독일, 한국의 연사분들을 모셨습니다. 첫 번째 순서는 존 F 케네디 예술센터 부대표이자 교육 총괄이신 조던 라살의 발표입니다. 케네디 예술센터는 지난 수십 년간 국가적 수준의 문화예술 교육 프로젝트를 지역과 현장에 보급하기 위해 다양한 파트너십을 구축하고 예술교육 전문 인력의 역량을 강화하기 위해 노력해왔습니다. 오늘의 발표 주제는 예술기관과 현장에서 가치와 실천의 간극 좁히기입니다. 조던 라살 부대표를 단상위로 모시겠습니다. 큰 박수 부탁드립니다.
Thank you so much. Hello. Thank you to the Ministry of Culture, Sports, and Tourism, and to CASES, to Dr. Park, and your incredible staff who have taken such great care of all of us who are visiting. It's really an honor to be here. On behalf of the Kennedy Center, which is located in Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States. I'm so glad to be with you. Let me tell you who is standing in front of you so you know. Doing it. Hey, okay, that's me. I come to you with a background as being a teacher. I started out as a music teacher. I taught children ages 10 to 15. So that's a really exciting time of life if you remember being that age. Your life changes every 20 minutes or so. And that was really exciting to teach music to that group. Then I worked with nonprofit organizations in multiple cities in the United States. And I worked with the Chicago Public Schools in the Arts Education Department, making policy change and running student programs there. And then that's what brought me to the Kennedy Center, working with an entire team of people who work with students, teachers, school districts, and cities across our entire nation. So I want to tell you a little brief overview of what we do at the Kennedy Center and make sure that I am addressing a bit of the scope of what we do, and then diving into some very specific questions that will guide us through our talk today. Okay. So the mission of Kennedy Center Education, you'll see there on the screen. We exist to bring the arts to learners of all ages and abilities in ways that spark curiosity, foster understanding, and uplift citizen artistry. And that really means using your art to give back to your community and work for social good. So we work locally in the city where we exist, as well as across the country. We work with students and young people, as well as educators and teaching artists. And we work with entire cities and sometimes school districts specifically that are within those cities. So who do we serve? So every year we reach about 2.1 million educators and students. We offer so many different programs. We do not know how to say no. We engage learners in many countries. We have online resources that are free to use. And we have been part of the Kennedy Center from the very beginning. So when they decided to build a cultural center for the United States, it was written right into the legislation from the very beginning that education had to be part of the center. That is not always the case with cultural centers in our country. Sometimes education is sort of added on later, and we are an example that is not that way. It's very lovely that we are not. Okay, quickly, this is my team. I lead a team of about 42 people who work in all these different areas of education, okay? So there's the overall administration, making sure that school groups come to us. This VSA in accessibility is really about serving students of all different abilities. So we work with organizations across the country who work with students with disabilities. We make sure that people coming to the Kennedy Center have access to the arts and have an easy time experiencing the arts no matter what. And in addition to that, we curate and produce an entire season of theater, dance, and music for young people. So part of the Kennedy Center does that for adults, big name groups coming through on our stages. We in education do that for young people, and that's in our programs and productions group. Okay, in addition, digital learning I mentioned has a bunch of free online resources, lessons and media, videos, etc. for anybody's use, so please do come check us out. Our school and community programs work with schools, with teachers, and with entire cities who apply to partner with us. And then finally, we are lucky enough that we have our own research and evaluation team as part of my staff, so they help us with making sure that we are evaluating our programs, that we're reporting that out to everyone in a way that is really robust. So today, I want to talk to you about this idea of aligning the practices that we have with the values we hold. The UNESCO framework and what I've learned now, CASES, as well as the Kennedy Center, share a lot of these same values. So you'll see some of these highlighted words in terms of enabling all learners, inclusive, access, right? Quality. We share a lot of those same words in our Kennedy Center mission and education, what we're doing, engage and uplift all learners, right? Quality arts education. So how do we ensure that those values are visible? I'm gonna walk us through 3 different questions, and then we'll give examples of how we're trying to do that all the time at the Kennedy Center and the work that we're doing. So this first question is, how can arts institutions ensure that our practices are aligning with the values we espouse, right? How do we make sure that you can see it? In addition, how do our values show up in our design, in the way we recruit people to be part of our work, and the evaluation methods that we use? And then finally, how do we make sure that we are continuously improving? And that requires all of us to keep challenging our own assumptions and traditions. It can be a little uncomfortable, and that I challenge us all to experience in order to really grow, right? If you want to get somewhere new on the map, you cannot take the exact same roads. You have to go somewhere different, and it'll feel a little uncomfortable along the way. So, okay, let's dive into this first question. How can we ensure that our practices are aligning with our values? So one of our programs that we work directly with students is called the Washington National Opera Institute. So we have partners that live within our building. We have an opera company, we have an orchestra, and we work with those people. They're all part of the Kennedy Center. So we recruit students who are interested in opera, who have been studying it in their own lives, to come to us. They audition and they apply, and we select them, and they come in the summertime and study with us for 3 weeks, where they are connected to professional musicians. And in the past, it was very traditional. Each student learned an aria, they studied with another musician, they practiced that, and at the end of the program, each student got up, performed their aria, we all clapped, and everybody went home. Fine. Value in that, they learned something, they're stretching and growing as musicians, wonderful. But what we realized was that is not actually inclusive. If you really want to be inclusive, you are inviting in the participants to help with the design of the program itself. So we opened it up to students. We spent a year, we redesigned the whole program, and we asked the students, what would you like the culminating event to look like? So they designed a very different process. Still, each person practiced and learned their aria, but they themselves created groups where they would find the connections between all of the different arias, and they composed their own, what we call recitative, right? Which is the speech that connects the parts of the opera. So they wrote that themselves, and then when they performed in these groups, and it felt like these small ensemble, almost plays, little miniature operas, if you will. It was so much more engaging, emotional, and connected, and the students themselves had ownership over what they were singing and how it was connected to everyone else. In addition, we made sure to offer education around the careers that go beyond just performing opera. So what else can you do in the arts? And we brought in people to talk to them about that. What is the health and wellness issues that you need to have if you're considering being an opera singer? How do you take care of that voice? And then what are some of the basic business practices if you want to be in the arts? How do you make sure that you can actually make a living? In addition to that, we are seated in the capital of the nation. So we connected these young people who come from all different parts of the country with the legislators and lawmakers who are right there in our city. They are always wanting to hear good news stories. They're always wanting to engage with local constituents. And it was helpful for us. We get to sit back and say, share your good news and talk about the importance of arts education in your life. And it made such a difference. Each one of them felt, again, like they owned the process and that they were really valued participants. Okay, next question. How do these values show up in our programming design, in the way we recruit people, and how we evaluate? Okay, one example from a previous time in my life before the Kennedy Center was in Chicago Public Schools. Now, Chicago is our nation's third largest city, and there are over 650 schools in the district. It's massive. So we would talk to principals and find that they would say to us, or the school leaders, they always wanted arts to be part of their students' lives, but they didn't always know how to make it happen. It was too much pressure on them from all over the place, too many requirements. To be a school leader, you have to be able to juggle so many things. So it was our job to make it easier for them. That's the way we interpreted our job. So we went and learned all the different requirements from different subject areas, and we put together sample schedules for them. These are schedules that could meet all of the different requirements in the arts, but also physical education and science and math and everything else that there was pressure to meet. We would give them those samples so that they didn't have to do that extra step, and they could put the arts in their schools using our methods or using our examples to help get the ball rolling. In addition, I want to give you an example of looking at equity. So remember, equity is not equality, right? Equity is realizing where a little bit larger investment might need to be made and being willing to invest in certain places more than others because the need is stronger. So when we do an evaluation, for example, of one of the, we curate a play So we pick a designer, we pick a writer, we put together a creative team, they create a show. Our evaluators come in and say, if students attend this performance, will they have a stronger sense of empathy, for example? And if they study our learning guide before the production and are involved in a talk-back session after the production, will that help boost that level of empathy in each of the students? This is great. We want to learn this. We want to show the results to our evaluators. But what we realized was, in the way that we do the randomized control trial, the traditional way is that one group does not get to see the show, and one group does. And then you compare the two. And we said, this is just not fair. It's not equitable. So what we made sure to do is, instead of that, we found a way through the evaluation to measure before they saw the show, and that was sort of the pre and post for one of the groups. And the other group, we did the pre, and then they got all the services, and then we measured the post. All the groups got to see the show and experience the art, and we felt that that was much more equitable in terms of serving that population and giving them the chance to experience the artwork. And I'll tell you, the results came in beautifully, that they were more empathetic when they were involved in all of that artwork. Okay. And lastly, how can we as arts organizations and leaders, wherever you are, you know that whatever chair you occupy, you can make a difference, right? So how can we continuously challenge ourselves to improve and challenge those assumptions and traditions? Okay, so here's a story for you. We used to run what was called an arts integration conference. So, you know, arts integration, you study something in art and something in another academic subject, you weave them together. So let's say it's like dance and weather patterns, and so you mix those things together, and then you learn more about both dance and the weather patterns, right, by the time you're done with the lesson. We would hire the same exact teaching artists to run the same exact workshops year after year. So people would come to the conference, and in fact, I had a colleague confess to me and say, oh yes, I love coming to that conference because I can go see a baseball game and not miss anything in the conference because I've seen it all before. Humiliating. Nobody wants that. So we changed it. We listened, we asked for advice. What do you want to see? What are you dealing with in your classrooms? How can we be a resource for people's actual contemporary teaching practice? And we changed it to an arts education conference. So yes, it has certain principles and elements of arts integration, but also has a special education track that's running throughout it to help with learners of all abilities. It has all kinds of other arts for art's sake, tactics that are part of this conference, and we hire new people to give new and exciting content every year, such that we got feedback that says, today was a strong day. I left with much to think about and process. This evening I keep thinking, this is what a good conference does. I have a lot to chew on. To make sure that we are continuously improving, we ensure that we schedule regular discussions to check in, to check that learning and say, are we continuously making things better? And then we invite advisory councils, experts who we respect, which by the way include teachers and young people. Not just the people who have a title and a bunch of degrees. That's also important, but what about the actual young people and the people who are practicing teaching in the classroom? And we ask them to give us advice on how we can do things better. So I challenge you all to open up your practices to test those assumptions and traditions and make sure that our practices are matching up and aligning with our values. Some images to leave you with, and then I think we have time. I'm going to do this one quick little video, and then that's how I'll leave you. I got it.
We're at the Kennedy Center.
The Get on the Bus program gives scholarships to Title I schools within 50 miles of the Kennedy Center. The schools apply and are given 50 free tickets to a show and a school bus to transport the students and teachers to downtown DC.
There are a lot of different needs from schools, and sometimes it can be challenging to meet those needs, but then when the students come here, it's just like, wow, like I meet somebody's day.
We love providing world-class entertainment for children. I think that it provides a level of social emotional learning, especially with our wraparound content and engagement. We have amazing performers, really, really talented and dedicated designers, crew, directors, who all come together to make these world premiere productions.
Education is one of the 4 pillars of the Kennedy Center's mission, and accessibility to the arts is a big part of that.
What skills are most important for you to do your job successfully?
My number one skill that I've been working on starts with a K, is kindness. Sometimes it almost doesn't matter how good a person is. It's important how kind they are. We don't have to love every single, or I should say, we don't have to like every single thing about what we do, what we choose to do. But we have to go into it caring about people. We have to go into it knowing that the way we speak, it changes how they might feel. You know, so I try to work with kindness first.
It's always going to be a bit surreal to have something that you wrote, something that you made, be adapted and then put up on stage at the Kennedy Center, because the Kennedy Center is the Kennedy Center, right? This is America's premier arts institution, right? To bring your kids into this beautiful building and have them walk around and let them know this belongs to them. This is yours. If you live here, this belongs to you. You need not be afraid or ashamed or timid or reticent about coming into this big, fancy, palatial space, because it turns out this is your palace. This is your palace, and I hope that's how they feel.
Opera Institute is a pre-professional program for young musicians who are interested in studying voice and opera.
The Kennedy Center Dance Lab is 2 weeks of really, really intense training.
The Summer Music Institute at the Kennedy Center is a place where, first of all, young people come and raise their playing to an extremely high level.
The musicians here are so open and so kind, and they are so willing to work with you.
The VSA International Young Musicians Program is all about excellence in music by musicians who identify as part of the deaf or disability community.
Thank you.
네, 미국의 대표적인 국립기관으로서 그 케네디 예술센터가 예술교육을 통해 나누고 싶어하는 가치를 유네스코 문화예술교육 프레임워크의 주요 가치와 연결 지어 주셨는데요. 유네스코 문화예술교육 프레임워크는 지난 2024년 2월 새롭게 만들어진 문화예술 교육의 목표들을 명시하고 있고 한국 정부는 대표단으로서 또 박의실 원장님께서 보고관으로서 활동하시면서 채택에 큰 기여를 한 바가 있습니다. 첫 번째 골에서 얘기하는 인클루전, 포용, 이쿼티, 균등, 억세스 접근성의 가치에서 한번 다시 읽어주셨는데요. 발표해 주시고 깊은 생각들을 하게 해주신 조던 라살님께 다시 한번 큰 박수 부탁드리겠습니다. 다음은 모두를 위한 새로운 공간, 지역사회를 위한 예술교육에 대해 발표를 청해 듣겠습니다. 독일 피나바우시 센터 베티나 멜츠 예술 프로젝트 총괄님을 단상 위로 모시겠습니다. 큰 박수 부탁드립니다.
Dear President Dr. Park, dear audience here in the space and also online, dear colleagues, and first of all also dear artists who are here, because we are talking about the role of art in the society, and I'm happy to have many people who want to engage in this field. And thank you very much for your beautiful lecture. I took up two things. This was, if you want to go somewhere new, you cannot take the same old roads, which I liked. And also the fact of saying, this is your palace. And maybe that's the connection between our two lectures, because first of all, I want to thank you all very much. The ministry, I want to thank CASES, and I'm totally impressed by the initiative of Korea to build this project, mainly also for dance. I met this morning the team of Dream Dance, and I'm so impressed that you have 29 centers all over the country working on dance for young people. I think Germany can learn a lot from this. So I will shift a little bit the focus in my part to the question, how should art institutions look like if you want to take a new path? How can art and society connect in a new way? And the title is New Spaces for Future Art and for Everybody. And I say also maybe 2 or 3 words to myself. I studied first biology. I wanted to be an ecologist. This was already on the map 50 years ago. But then I decided to play theater myself, something which maybe today would have been called dance. Then I studied applied theater theory, and I worked a lot in the field of opera, mainly in dance. Also, I was directing festivals. I directed the Young Opera in Stuttgart, in the State Opera, which was the first big project in the field of opera in Germany, opera with young kids on stage and also for a young audience. And then I was in the Ministry for Culture for around 14 years, responsible for dance and theater in North Rhine-Westphalia, which is a huge region with 18 million people. And when I came to the ministry, I was looking forward to working with Pina Bausch, but she died this year. So I probably in this circle, I don't have to explain who is Pina Bausch. But it was like an earthquake. And there was this question, how can you preserve a big work in the arts, in dance, for future generations? And then the same year, I have to go on, they also closed the Schauspielhaus because it had to renovate it. They closed one theater. And so quite early we had the idea to combine this, these two things, and to think about a new art institution with a focus on dance, but with an interdisciplinary orientation, which should be the house for the Pina Bausch Dance Company, the house for the Pina Bausch Foundation, which was founded immediately after her death, and we started also to give a budget and to build up the archive with Pina Bausch's son, Salomon Bausch. Then it should be a place for international production and mainly also a place for participation. So I'm talking about a future project. The Pina Bausch Center does not yet exist. It looks a little bit like in the programs, but it will be opened up, let's say maybe 2030. But in the moment we have already the chance to try out things, which is very important, because I think you cannot build a building and then you can say, oh, now everything is new, but we have the chance to try out things. And maybe back, so I think also the fields of international production and of participation are connected very much to the work of Pina Bausch, because as you probably know, she was working in Wuppertal, but she was mainly working all around the world. So for example, she had a residency in Seoul to do a production. This was Rough Cut, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. So she would stay with the whole company for a research period in another country. And this international network in Mumbai, in Seoul, in Istanbul, all around the world, has always been part of her work. So in future, we want to give back this hospitality also to artists from the world. So the task is that we today have to build a place for the art of tomorrow. We all don't know what will be the art in 10 years. And it should be, in the same time, a place for, let's say, outstanding artistic work, but also a place for participation. It should be a place for diversity, as we all know how quickly the structure of our societies are changing. And mainly it should be open for everybody. And it's very easy to say open for everybody, but you probably all know that it's very complicated to realize this. So this is a beautiful theater. It was opened up in 1966. And as it has to be renovated, it was the favorite place of Pina Bausch. It has 2 beautiful Japanese gardens from a very famous Japanese garden architect inside. It's an amazing building, but it has to be renovated. And so I think this, I will not talk about, in the first row, about the work of Pina Bausch. Now our new director is Boris Chamatz. He's French, and he's also one of the leading choreographers and artists in the world. But I will today mainly talk about this process of building a space for this dance work, but also for an interdisciplinary work. So mainly the idea is that we have the old theater. Old, for Germany, it's not really an old house. It was built after the Second World War, but it's a very democratic building. From each seat, you have a very good view on the stage, and you have a really nice space for dance. You have no balconies. Every seat has the same quality almost. And we will have a new building which is having what we all know we need. In the old theaters, you have a stage, you have an iron curtain, and then you have an auditorium. And I think for future arts, we need more flexible spaces. And so we will build a second new building beside, which will have a very flexible space, and which will have also a big rehearsal space. And the whole will be combined by to a new entire situation, which is inviting also, like school class coming in the morning, everybody using it all day. And last year we finished the International Architecture Competition. It was for me very interesting to write the text with the others together for this competition and to say, what do we want? Which kind of situation do we need to have a house which is having an architectural gesture of being open for everybody? And the winner of the international competition is the studio Diller, Scofidio, and Renfro. They are based in New York, and it's one of the, I would say, top 5, top 10 architecture studios in the world. You might know the High Line in New York. That's an old railway transformed into a park, but they also did the renovation of the MoMA and of Lincoln Center. And Elizabeth Diller is an amazing interdisciplinary artist. So we have the chance to invent a new institution for the 21st century, and in the structure, to establish education, openness, a good situation of participation, as well in the architectural form, and also in the artistic content. And what is very important for us is that it's open 24/7. Because at least in Germany, most of the theaters open up 1 hour before the performance, but it's a public space, and the public space should be used by the public all day. So schools could come to a theater in the morning and have rehearsals there, do workshops. Young people could come for their rehearsal work. So it should connect excellence, participation. And when I say participation, I think it's important. There's a difference, I think, between education and participation. When you say participation, it means that the young people also have some kind of authorship in what they do. And the idea is also that it's connecting art and the city, that it's connecting art with other disciplines. So dance will be in the focus, but as well we will have cooperation, and we have already, with science institutes and the building and the urban space. So what we call the preliminary phase is this preparation we do now by doing already tryouts, formats, events. We are preparing the new institution, the strategy, the content, and also the structure. And when I started, the first thing, in the moment in the theater, with the existing theater, we cannot use the big stage, we can only use the lobby, but it's an amazing space. But as said, if we want to connect with the city, it's maybe better to go out. And we did an audio walk with the group Rimini Protocol. Some of you might know it's in Germany, in Europe, it's a very famous, all over the world, it's a very famous collective. And we did an audio walk with them in the city. We started on a cemetery quite far away from the Pina Bausch Center, the future Pina Bausch Center. And we called it projects, or we call it projects Pina Bausch Center under construction. So to make clear that we are in this building period. And this was you had a GPS in your ear and you followed this GPS and you discovered the city. So it was like building ways into the city and not only focusing on the building itself. And it ended with a big cloud on the roof of the building and kind of the city disappearing in this cloud. So for a moment, I want to go back to the architecture of the Scofidio Renfro, because one thing is the city, the other thing is the building itself. I showed already this picture, and you see in front that is a big rehearsal space. So I think the whole building is expressing a kind of openness, and it's almost like Elizabeth Diller is a fantastic architect, and she's very interested in dance, and it looks almost like it's a machine for making theater, but very open, very friendly, and you have a big rehearsal space. And to make it very concrete with the open doors, the new performance space can even open the doors towards the river, which is behind the building. So, and it's totally flexible, so it can have totally flexible situations. So if a school would come, if a group of young teachers would come, if a company from Korea comes, they can always build different situations. And it's mainly a glass block, which is made out of recycled steel and wood, and it has outdoor stages, which is important, and it has stages where people just can come in during the day and use them for rehearsals, and a lot of greenery. So this is an inner court, what you see. So the idea is also to build new performance situations. So this could be for like projects like circus dance, but it could also maybe be used for an exhibition or for a conference. And it's open to the sky. You can close it, but you can also just leave it open. And it's also very important for us that I think we have a role as cultural institutes to make a very strong point on sustainability. So the building should be like a best practice example on sustainability with material cycles, solar energy. It has a climate active facade, and we want to take away the stone around, because many cultural institutions have big places in front with a lot of stone, but they cannot really be used. And the access to the river behind should be made maybe even with dancing in the water. Just to understand, that's a very special thing in Wuppertal. It's a monorail which is also going behind the house. I think it's almost the only one like this. It was built in around 1900, in the same time as the Tour Eiffel. So I give some example of the preparation of this under construction phase that we have in the moment, trying out different formats. I think one work of the Pina Bausch Foundation with Tanztheater was very important. When last year they did Café Müller, a masterpiece of Pina Bausch, which is normally done together with Sacre. And in this case, Sacre was done by 30 dancers from 14 different African countries. So to show that it's not always the Paris opera, the Berlin opera, the Antwerpen opera, but to give the work of a great artist to also to very other different communities all over the world. And this was a project called Wundertal. Wundertal means Valley of Wonders, but it's also playing with the name of the city, Wuppertal. And it was a series of different events, but the biggest was to close one street under the monorail for 300 meters. And we had an ensemble of 200 people, 160 amateurs of the city, and 20 people of the company, and 20 students of the dance schools in Cologne and in Essen. And the idea was like to open the mind of people for what could dance be. And it was amazing, beautiful. It was a very happy situation, no cars, just colors, just people. And there were around 6,000 people in this 3 hours there. And it had a very, very strong reaction in the city. So they start with jumping in this little mountains of color, and then it ended up in a big rave. I will jump a little about this. The other question was, which I think is crucial for all of us, is we want to have other audiences. We want to have young audience. We want to have colored audience, diverse audience. How do we do this? And I thought maybe it's not the first task to say you should come to me, but to say, okay, I will go into city parts where the community is very diverse. So we worked in a part of the city where you have a big part of African migrants. And it was an amazingly beautiful work to be, first of all, curious for what the kids need. And we had an open space, so we didn't work only on dance or only on visual arts, but we had an open space where the kids could decide what they want to do, and they could decide if they want to paint, if they work on video, if they work on photography, or if they want to dance. And another part of building the strategy for the future is building a sustainability strategy. We worked together with an international think tank, which is just next to us, the Wuppertal Institute. And on one hand, we work with students, because I think it's important to integrate students into our work and young stage designers on sustainability and stage design. And we try to bring together all the different initiatives in culture and sustainability. And we do different projects like this one, which was very beautiful. It's a project of Raumlabor Berlin. It's a quite famous collective in Germany. And we took old furniture of Wuppertal, and we built this house called Symbiosis. So it was all about what is trash and what can be used as a resource for building. And it was a group of 20 young architects and artists building this house in front of our theater, kind of as an extended foyer and as a place for a DJ, for a workshop, for a discussion. And they even made the costumes out of used textile. And also we invented a festival for young audience, for young dance music theater, because I think it's very important. We have a lot of evaluation in Germany that there's so much depression with young people. After the pandemic, then there's the war in the Ukraine, then there is all this bad news about the climate. And I think we have to open up a space where young audience can discuss, can find also a positive way of how to get into action and not only put your head in the sand, you say in Germany. So we had this group of young kids that followed all the production. They did the moderation of the talks, they prepared, they did documentation on the pieces. And we mainly had a couple of very beautiful pieces which were putting the beauty of nature in the center. So this was an amazing circus dance piece, giving a lot of energy, and it was, it's like a knitted coral reef. So I think all the pieces gave a different view on questions of how do we deal with each other and how we deal with the surrounding nature, which is so crucial for us. I just jump over this because I think time is running out. For the international production this year, we had the Akram Khan Company in there for a residence. And Akram Khan is one of the most famous choreographers in the world, but he was only there for rehearsing. And we opened up the rehearsals 2 times a week for the people of the city. He was working mainly with Indian dancers coming from all over the world to Wuppertal, so it's a best practice for our future. And it was a lot about the relation between tradition and contemporary dance. Another cooperation was with Anne-Theresa de Kersmaker. Some of you also might know Rosas from Belgium. Also a piece which has to do with questions of sustainability with a very young ensemble. And always when we invite people like this, we combine it with workshops for students in the region. This was a performance by a young choreographer with an Israeli background, and he worked with his family, which was also a really nice success for schools, having his sister on stage, his mother, his father, and we will do a new production this year, which is called Cercle, together with the Festival d'Avignon, a little bit again like Wundertal last year, working with 200 people again in the city on the question of the role of the circle by building community in dance. Because the circle is kind of combining the traditional dance and contemporary dance. And I think dance is a very good tool to bring empathy in the world. I will finish with just some examples, because around 20 years ago when Pina Bausch did her first masterpiece, she gave Kontakthof, one masterpiece she made a new version with teenagers over 14. And I talked about this with the team of Traces today, of Dream Dance today. So she had kids, young people of around 14 dancing this piece. And in this period, around 20 years ago, a lot of initiatives started in North Rhine-Westphalia, which were very important for the combination of education and art. So I just mentioned a few. Most of them, like Takeoff, try to combine seeing art for young audience, dance for young audience, and also so reception and doing it yourself. We have a central organization who is taking care of cultural education activities. We try to bring with 100 degrees, when I say we, it's the whole region, projects to disadvantaged city areas. And there's a big program which might be interesting also for cases. It's called YeKids. It was a program to give every kid the chance in a primary school to learn an instrument, but now it's also open for dance and for singing. And there is a couple of other informations, but I think I have to stop now. There's a big program of culture and art in the schools. And I think it's very important to establish structures, because there's so much engagement from the artists, but if we don't have structures like you have with cases, we will not bring it to a future. So this is just some pictures. I will finish now, and I thank you for listening.
피나바우시에서 시작했지만 지금은 부퍼탈의 오픈 스페이스, 공공의 장소로서 중요한 역할들을 해외에 나가고 계시고 계획하시는 것들 공유 주셨는데요. 이 새로운 공간에서 시민들과 함께할 행보, 특히 이제 저희 청소년들과 함께 나갈 댄스 프로젝트도 많이 기대가 됩니다. 다시 한번 베티나 밀즈님께 다시 한번 큰 박수 부탁드리겠습니다. 다음은 미국의 학교 교육 과정 K12와 미디어 아트에 대해서 전미 미디어 예술교육협회 대표이자 CEO인 데인 올스님을 무대로 모시고 발표 들어보도록 하겠습니다. 큰 박수 부탁드립니다.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here, very honored. Thank you to the Ministry of Arts and Culture for this excellent forum, and all of the speakers for their informative presentations. I'm deeply appreciative for this opportunity to speak about media arts. Media arts is quite diverse and complex and requires quite a bit of explanation. My name is Dane Olson. I currently serve as President and CEO for the National Association for Media Arts Education. I previously have been an educator and administrator in media arts with multiple leadership roles in its development and establishment in the United States, and particularly California and the Los Angeles Unified School District. I'm an intermedia artist that works across forms. Also, I'm authoring a forthcoming book from Rutledge on media arts education. This lecture is based on that book and will provide you with basic explanation and context of media arts and present how it is taught along with a few student works. Finally, I will explain a little bit about the theory of media arts and its tremendous potential for educational benefits for all students. And I definitely mean all students. Media arts is most simply defined as technology-based creative production. So technology is at the center. Creative production and design. Design is very important as an inclusion. It is most precisely and technically defined as being machine-based, multimodal or multisensory or multimedia, and indirect. In other words, when I take a photo, I'm using a machine to capture the image as an indirect form of expression. On the other hand, a traditional artist would physically act to produce works across dance, music, etc. This definition holds with AI as well, which is based in machines. Of course, this is what has caused some wariness of these forms from the traditional community. The term multimodal refers to media arts' ability to combine the various aesthetic elements and media into multimedia, such as sound and image in film. The primary media arts forms are listed here as photo, graphics, imaging, sound, etc., and should be familiar to most people. XR here stands for extended reality, which is defined as immersive or spatial media such as virtual and augmented reality. These forms give rise to a plethora of subforms, such as motion graphics, game design, electronic journalism, wearable technology, and again, artificial intelligence. The combination of all these diverse forms provides media arts amazing potential for learning and creating. Students of media arts can literally produce, design, and simulate anything imaginable. It is probably difficult for the novice to conceive what that means. But if you can form and shape any phenomena, you can use it to construct products and experiences around history, science, language, and mathematics. I think of media arts as lenses of creative inquiry. This is quite unique to media arts. When we provide a student with the tools and proficiency of media arts, we instantly empower them to see and create their world through these aesthetic amplifiers and processors. If you have a camera, you suddenly see the world through the lens of the camera. So for example, use your fingers to take a picture of color in this room and find color and try to take a picture of that. So you're seeing the world through color suddenly. This extends to all the tools of media arts. So again, it's like dimensions that you see through these media tools. Again, with the camera, you might take pictures of shapes. Nature, can you find nature somewhere in the space? Education, how would you take pictures that show education in this space? Or history is taking place right now. Or is there math in this room? Counting the number of people, the dimensions of objects in the room, the angles that are going on in the construction of the building and so forth. So this is creative inquiry, which is vital to cognitive and academic development. This lens then extends to all the tools of media arts. Once students have basic competency, they can proceed to create their own original works. Once you can use the camera, the video camera, or the voice recorder, you can easily scale up that ability to begin your own creative investigations. You can create any photo, movie, audio recording. You can become a journalist or documentarian, capturing and sharing your own expression, visions, voice, story, and perspective. This is why media arts is very empowering of students to create their own works, to even create and design their own worlds, such as Minecraft, and share them globally. Media arts is now prominent and paramount in our society. The statistics below, such as 86% of students use YouTube for learning, indicate that we are a media arts infused society. I tell my students to look at their phones. Everything in and about them is based in media arts aesthetics and tools. Media arts is the basis of our digital society's communications, design, and interactivity. It is the aesthetically and technically formed interface for how we know about, form, and interact with our world. In the 1950s, Marshall McLuhan described this as the global village. That prophecy has come to pass as we are now immediately aware of what is happening all over the planet. This fact then mandates that all students should master these new multiliteracies. They should know how to verify basic facts from fiction, identify misinformation, and be able to sensibly manage their digital and technical lives for their own and others' well-being. Importantly, they should be able to effectively present their own opinions and expressions in the public discourse. They should be empowered producers of media rather than passive consumers. Media arts education has only recently begun to be formally organized as a separate subject area. It has primarily been under the visual arts. The first few points here show that standards in media arts have provided a doorway into its differentiation and establishment. It's very different from the traditional arts and requires its own specific training and ongoing professional development. Media arts teachers have been on their own to develop their own programs and master the complex laboratory. Now we have legislation to make media arts an official subject, and we're moving towards developing credentials for media arts teachers to teach media arts courses. Now we have a national association that has parity with the other 4 arts disciplines, and we're beginning to organize for our first conference. This Venn diagram shows how media arts is related to the other disciplines of dance, music, etc., and their aesthetic elements, sound, light, motion, and text. Media arts sits at the center and is both distinct as a discipline and overlapping with the others. We are not creating another silo for media arts. We are creating an interconnective whole of the arts, which I would call interarts. As a media artist with a media arts-centric point of view, I can access any of these elements. In my own work, for example, I might begin with a poem. I might vocalize that poem and note its cadence and form. I would record that poem and accentuate it with sound effects and musical accompaniment. Then I would begin to form that video that would illustrate and amplify these effects with light, color, motion, as well as images. We can start our production from any element and then add any other elements in our production. The result is all of these properties of media arts: interarts, interconnective, intermediating. Media arts is utterly holistic as the totality of all aesthetics: real, simulated, technological, and imagined aesthetics. This is a new definition of a holistic and of aesthetics, which has a profound implications for the arts, for learning, and for education. This slide presents how we can begin to teach media arts in a course I would call multimedia design. As it states there, the goal of this class is to support students towards fluency across modalities. In this case, we are teaching basic imaging from composition to storytelling. This looks very much like visual arts, but there is a clear distinction. These techniques will provide students the basic ability to form an effective composition, gain basic drawing abilities in order to present their ideas. Students will move back and forth between the computer and pencil and paper to rapidly develop these skills across media. So in the slide there, the white headings are the drawings, and on the right in the yellow are the digital computer-based production. Now, in the concept drawing portion, this is where they're drawing their ideas, learning to sketch ideas, where the media artist and designer can roughly sketch out what they're thinking, rather than produce a final finished image through drawing and painting. They are using drawing to think, to iterate, and to improve their designs, to give dimension to their ideas for later technical processing and production. So this is a model storyboard on the right here, where these basic skills are refined and demonstrated, showing the cinematic concepts for creating a story. In this case, an unlikely hero, a ball, a small ball, which encounters some big, mean blocks on a road. The ball must overcome this obstacle, and through a dramatic climax that you see there in the middle of the storyboard, this exercises the dimensions of filmmaking where there's a dramatic climax and the ball leaps over the blocks. Very simple story, but actually constructing it for students is very difficult, challenging to understand that the camera is what moves. The camera can be anywhere in space. It can be close up, it can be far away. This is what transformed theater into film, because of the ability of the camera to be anywhere, everywhere, all at once, just like the movie that we saw recently in Taiwan Laundromat, and you could see the multiverse within the laundromat. So media arts has this ability to play with space and time. Students then form an interesting composition of colored shapes to form symbolic meaning with compositions and emotion with digital tools. Those are combined in an emotional compositions, which are hand-drawn, and then reproduced on the computer, which become the background for an active character that they've designed. Here we see that storyboard of the ball and blocks put into a simple animation.
This is fun. Huh? What's that?
Where do you think you're going?
Oh, no. Wait, I have an idea. Huh? Yeah.
So what skills are exhibited there? We have 3D realism, storytelling, dramatic enaction, emotional expression, perspective drawing, sequence, animation, narration, special effects, musical accompaniment. The list goes on and on. This is a complex production and sets the students up to produce their own story about their own unlikely hero. And it's fairly easy to produce. Even young children can put together these kinds of movies. Now, these abilities quickly escalate for students to produce their own animations. These animations show this ability to edit and synchronize sound and music, which is essential to compelling movie making. This brings it back to our Venn diagram, where we see, oh, this is another example, sorry. All right, so this brings us back to our Venn diagram, where we see that media arts can function as a multimodal translator. In other words, the media arts aesthetic interface, that is, your phone, your device, is an aesthetic interface, right? You see colors, shapes, icons, you interact with those, is capable of integrating not only all art forms, but any subject area, content, or concept. And this is how media arts functions in our society. When we're looking at media, information is being processed through interactive multimedia. We're not only an information society, we are a multimedia information society. The arts and aesthetics are the basis for how we communicate and understand our world. Research shows that multimedia makes things more interesting and understandable, so we learn more. This diagram shows how Media Arts functions as a translator of information and content through the Media Arts production process into meaningful aesthetic cultural products. Therefore, global warming can be illustrated literally by a world that is on fire. This production process exercises the holistic capacities of our multimodal cognition. Those steps are the cognition that is occurring. Research shows that our cognition is primarily sensory-based or multimodal. The arts are central to developing holistic cognition. We see this concept exemplified in these students' production of a news story or documentary about global warming.
Global warming is happening at record levels due to the increased amount of greenhouse gases generated by human activities, leading to a drastic change of Earth's environment.
Rising seas, heat waves, intense rainfall, storm surges, and droughts are some of the effects of the accelerating climate change.
So students simply record their voices for the narration and then place images that are synchronized with the words. Very easy to produce.
Stars and galaxies, and not just the big...
Sorry, let's wait. When we look at and learn from media, we're multimodally experiencing and feeling and empathizing with the abstract concept. Media arts animates ideas and makes abstract concepts become embodied with aesthetic meaning, color, movement, emotion, and story. This video shows how theoretical physics can become understandable through media arts. Brian Greene is explaining space, which even if it is completely empty, still has underlying properties.
Stars and galaxies, and not just the big stuff, but tiny things down to the very last atoms of gas and dust. What if you took it all away? What would be left? Most of us would say nothing. And we'd be right. But strangely, we'd also be wrong. What's left is empty space. And as it turns out, empty space is not nothing. It's something. Something with hidden characteristics as real as all the stuff in our everyday lives. In fact, space is so real, it can bend. Space can twist. And it can ripple. So real that empty space itself helps shape everything in the world around us and forms the very fabric of the cosmos.
Well, you can't understand anything about the world unless you understand space, because that's the world. The world's
Okay,
space.
well, at
with
this
stuff
point,
in it.
the
We're not usually
presentation
very
is
conscious
not
of
working.
space.
But then again, I tell people, fish are probably not conscious of water either. They're in it all the time.
Space is not really nothing. It actually
I
has a
apologize.
lot going on inside.
The media arts specialist here can't make the technology function. That happens sometimes. Okay, so just to get to the conclusion here, because I'm at the end of my presentation. Yeah, this is not, okay, there we go. So we have math integration and game design. And so media arts can function as this interdimensional, interactive text workspace, makerspace by which students basically can construct and simulate any kind of product or experience, and therefore change the game in terms of how they learn interactively and actively, and in constructing their own meaning. And so media arts can function as the 21st century center of education because it is able to intermediate between all of these and create a situation whereby students can demonstrate their learning in active production projects that are engaging, that are across disciplines, that are more flexible to their abilities and adaptive to new situations, new curriculum, new ideas, and it puts students directly in an ownership position of their learning and directing the learning process. That concludes my presentation. So thank you very much for listening, and I appreciate being here today with you. Thank you.
작은 사물에서 스토리텔링, 영상 혹은 다양한 장르 또 예술 분야 감각과 결합하면서 학교 안팎에서 직접 하고 계시는 미디어 교육 사례들 예시를 주면서 설명해 주셨는데요. 다시 한번 데인 올슨 씨께 큰 박수 부탁드리겠습니다. 네, 이렇게 저희 1부 세 분의 발표 듣고요. 지금부터 약 10분간 잠시 휴식 시간 가졌다가 2개 발표를 더 듣도록 하겠습니다. 네, 그러면 2부 순서를 시작하겠습니다. 이번에 발표는 영상 발표인데요. 하버드 교육대학원 프로젝트 제로의 루이자 펜폴드 씨입니다. 루이자는 예술 놀이, 학교 안에서 놀이와 현대미술 연결하기에 대한 발표를 진행해 주실 텐데요. 큰 박수로 영상 발제 부탁드려 보겠습니다. 박수 부탁드립니다.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Louisa Penfold, and I'm so sorry I can't be there in person. It is graduation week at Harvard, and so I need to be here in Boston to see all of my graduate students off on the next stage in their career. But I'm thrilled that I can join remotely, and I'm really excited to present on this project, Art Play, which I've been working on for the past year or so with my colleague Steve Seidel, looking at the integration of modern and contemporary art practices into Boston Public Schools classrooms. Okay, so a little bit about me. I'm originally from Australia, and I spent the first 5 years of my career designing play spaces for young children in art museums. And so I worked at the Ipswich Art Gallery in Australia, working with different artists and designers to create these immersive play spaces for kids. In 2015, I then moved over to London, and I did my PhD in the Learning Department at Tate, in collaboration with the University of Nottingham, and that research looked at the design of children's learning environments in modern art museums, and in particular looking at different ways that artists and designers explore materials, different techniques and processes that they use, how they fabricate new materials within themselves, and how we can take that and design play spaces where children learn through play and interaction with materials. So coming out of that body of research, I was really interested in how we could take some of these really interesting pedagogies and playful ways of learning and integrate it within the public school system. So in early 2020, I moved over to Boston, and I started working at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And so this research project comes out of a long history of partnership between the Harvard Graduate School of Education and Boston Public Schools. And so Art Play is really a project that's founded on partnership and collaboration, and looking at the affordances of relationships between art museums and artists, teachers and children. And so this project has come at a really fortuitous time where Boston Public Schools have been doing the redesign of their curriculum for 3- and 4-year-olds. And so this project has really looked at two key things. The first one is around the design of curriculum itself. So over the past year, I have spent a lot of time working with curriculum designers and coaches at BPS to design the arts curriculum that has rolled out in classrooms across the city. And the second piece being around the construction of different professional development opportunities for teachers, and how we can create these different like playful experiences where they get to learn and create alongside artists and with an array of different materials. So within this project, we have also utilized different like artworks and archival materials from 3 different cultural organizations. So the Harvard Art Museums, the Smithsonian Lab, and MoMA. So there's different artists and artworks that have been integrated into the classroom activities and the curriculum design itself that's taken from those institutions. All right, so those of you who have not been to the city of Boston, I hope that you can come one day, and I very much look forward to meeting you when you do. So Boston has a long history of investing in early childhood education, especially like over the past 20 years. There's been like a lot of attention drawn to like this audience. So Boston, the city of Boston itself, which you can see pictured on the right, has a population of around 650,000. And the city is located within the greater Boston area, which is home to around 4.5 million people. So in 2020, the then mayor of Boston announced that the city was going to roll out universal pre-K. So this is what's in some other countries people refer to as like free to attend preschool. So in 2020, universal pre-K started to roll out for all 4-year-olds across the city. And so part of the challenge with that was that they didn't have enough like physical classrooms in the regular schools to house these kids. So they started working really closely with these different community-based organizations. So these are like YMCAs and Boys and Girls Club, places where 3- and 4-year-olds had gone, but they hadn't been typically using a structured curriculum in the past. And these sites started to work with Boston Public Schools to roll out like this free to attend preschool program that has like a evidence-backed curriculum sitting behind it. And so in 2022, they started to expand that offering to include 3-year-olds. And so that was when we started the conversation around art play and, if Boston Public Schools is going to be designing and redesigning the curriculum for these age groups, let's do it in a way where we can think about integrating modern and contemporary art at the forefront of this. And, modern and contemporary art, in my opinion, plays a really important part in young children's learning and development because the artists of now are the artists who are responding to different issues, different things that happen in the world in lifetime. So through engaging in these artworks and these practices, children have the opportunity to be responding to and engaging with like these very current, real events and emotions and like phenomena that is happening in the world. Something else that we've also thought about a lot in this project is how we expand the canon of art history beyond like white Eurocentric males to include all of these modern and contemporary artists who are really at the forefront of innovation and come from an array of different like backgrounds and cultures and ethnicities and races, and really position those artists as central in children's learning. So, okay. So the core kind of like research focus of art play has looked at the question of how can contemporary and modern art practices support children's and teachers' creative learning in BPS's early childhood program. And we see that the construction of different creative learning opportunities as always being twofold, as always having to have that emphasis on children, but also on teachers at the same time, so that teachers get to play and make and create and experience the joyfulness of creating artworks, and then they can go and facilitate those experiences with children. So under that broader umbrella, we've also looked at the question of what are the different practices that facilitate these experiences, so classroom practices, professional development practices, and then how do children experience these, and then coming back to that idea of partnership, thinking about what the affordances of these collaborations are between universities, art museums, artists, and the public school system. Okay, So this project is also premised on the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of the Child, and in particular Article 31, which highlights children's rights to arts and culture, and more specifically outlines how all parties shall respect and promote the right of the child to fully participate in cultural and artistic life, and shall encourage the provision of appropriate and equal opportunities for cultural, artistic, recreational, leisure activity. We see like children's like engagement in these arts activities at a young age as allowing them to enter into like a cultural dialogue, which they'll then be able to sustain and continue throughout their lives. This research is also located at the intersection of 3 different key areas. The first being around visual art and the importance of the arts in terms of like giving children different opportunities to think creatively and critically, opportunities for children to express themselves and communicate in different ways that go just beyond words and numbers. And this project also comes at a time where there's like a very strong focus on teaching children literacy and numeracy skills that are often taught through like a standardized curriculum. So thinking about ways that we can expand the offering of what children are engaging with at schools to make sure that it really like encompasses the arts and like playful learning opportunities. This research also comes at a time when children and families are becoming an increasingly significant audience for museums around the world. And museums are thinking really carefully about, well, what is their core educational offering? Is it just bringing children into the gallery and like giving them a tour? Or, you know, is it like this a much broader array of offerings, such as like performances and residencies, and thinking about how we integrate our collection into curriculums and get it out into the schools? Another key foundational idea that has underpinned this research is the importance of material play. And so this was something that I looked at in a big way within my PhD research in London, but thinking about the importance of materials in modern and contemporary art and the importance of materials in early childhood. So materials, my understanding of materials in the formation of knowledge is that they play a really active role. So they're not just something that people project meaning onto, but materials work in dialogue with children, with people, to create different divergent learning pathways. So each different material opens up a different kind of like, it makes a different invitation for learning. For example, when a child plays with like wooden blocks, that creates different invitations around size, measurement, and gravity. Whereas when they play with paint, that creates a different set of invitations around texture, color, and consistency. So materials, you know, as I mentioned, play a really key part in both early childhood and in contemporary arts practice. And I think as educators, we can look to different ways that artists and designers explore materials and think about how we can like take that as inspiration for like how we then facilitate children's learning through play with materials in the classroom. Okay, and if you want to dig into that topic in more detail, I've got my article, Material Matters in Children's Creative Learning, which was published in MIT's Journal of Design and Science back in 2019. So that digs into that theory in a little bit more detail. Okay. All right, so as I mentioned, the focus of art play is two-pronged. The first being around the design of curriculum itself. And so in BPS's curriculum, there are 4 different units, and each unit features like 1 to 2 different art play activities, including like there's been action research, sound sculptures, cardboard constructions, nature art, different kind of performance and movement activities. And you can see some examples of these in action here. So on the left, we've got cardboard construction, and on the right, we've got the kids engaging in action painting. So the other big piece of this project was looking at the development and running of different professional development opportunities for teachers. You know, teachers are just such busy people. They have so much administration on their shoulders. They have so much that's expected of them. And so as a result, teachers don't always get opportunities to play and make with materials themselves. So that was something that we really wanted to put at the forefront of this project. And so over the past 12 months, we have run 5 different professional development sessions for Boston Public School teachers, and that's been with over 550 teachers. And in these sessions, which many of them were run at local art museums and at Harvard, the teachers get to experience and do the different activities first, and often in partnership with like different artists. And then then bring it into the classrooms to facilitate those activities with the kids. So on the left, we have that action painting professional development session for teachers. On the right, that is a sound sculpture that a group of teachers is making together. All right, so to look at zoom in on our research question, we conducted a series of interviews with curriculum designers, the teachers, and also like our cultural organisation partners at both the start and the end of the project. We have also been documenting and recording how the children experience the different activities in the classroom, and working really closely with 6 different schools. And then alongside that, also working with the teachers who engage in the professional development sessions to do different documentation and follow-up interviews of how they experience those sessions. Okay. And so another key thing in this that we're thinking about is like how we analyse creative learning. And thinking about creative learning that's not just something that's specific to visual art, but something that encompasses a much broader set of, a much broader mindset, and something that looks at these different dispositions and habits of mind, as Bill Lucas talks about in children's learning. So on the right here, you can see a diagram of Bill Lucas's, or the Centre for Real World Learning's 5-dimensional model of creative habits of mind. And so in it, they talk about the importance of being inquisitive, persistent, imaginative, disciplined, and collaborative. And so when we were doing like the analysis of like children's learning in the classroom and teachers learning in the professional development sessions, we use this framework to analyse that. Okay, so I want to give you a feel of what this looks like in practice and how it's been operationalised in the classrooms. So starting off with this cardboard construction activity, so we took Louise Nevelson's Sky Cathedral artwork from the MoMA collection, and thought about, okay, so how can we take this artwork? It's got incredible exploration of different concepts such as construction, measurement, size, shape, form. How can we put that into a form that children can then take up and explore through their play? And we also looked at the work of Charlotte Pozaneske, and she creates these different modular cardboard parts that pull apart and they can be constructed in different ways. You know, how can we take these really interesting artworks that explore that idea of construction and put it into a form that children can use? So here's an example of the curriculum in action. BPS have a really strong focus on linking different activities with literacy and with books. So you can see an example here of how they've set that up in terms of connecting to bigger guiding questions, key vocabulary we want to introduce to the kids as they're playing and making with the different materials, instructions on how to set it up, and then introduction to the activity. And so this resource, this classroom activity was also accompanied by another visual resource that includes different artwork images, different examples of how you can set it up in the space to really give teachers those practical things that they need to operationalize it in the classroom. You can also see in this classroom activity plan, it's got different suggestions for how to differentiate for different children across different age groups, and then facilitation tips, and then down the bottom is the links to the Massachusetts standards, which was actually part of this project, which I was most excited by, because I think sometimes there's this really dichotomous way of thinking that you can't do really creative experimental art things within a schooling system that uses standards, but in this project we've really looked at different opportunities and ways in which we can connect them. So we did the curriculum design. We then brought the teachers into this is actually at the Harvard Art Museums. They also have a Louise Nevelson sculpture. So we brought the teachers in to see it in person. We then did a creative workshop with them where they played and made and created with the cardboard themselves. And we gave them different ideas of different tools that they can use. That some of these materials were like then shipped out to them, so they had the physical resources to do the activities in the classroom. We gave them different ideas of like how they can sort and prepare the materials in advance. For example, using a laser cutter at a local library to cut the shapes out of the cardboard. And then we brought the activities into the classrooms, and the kids loved it. So you can see it in action here. This artwork was created at the Boston Chinatown Network Center. They have a wonderful Chinese immersion program there, and the children created this artwork, you know, in collaboration with one another over 2 different days. Okay, here's another example of the art play curriculum in action. This is Cicely Carew, who is an amazing painter and sculpturist based here in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And so we used her paintings as a starting point for designing the art play action painting sessions. So in it, we looked at like key different vocabulary and concepts. So we wanted the children to explore different ways that they can like set out the activity in the classroom, tips on how they can introduce the activity to kids and links with the standards. We then ran a professional development session with Cicely and at the Harvard Art Museum, and the teachers just loved it. Like she started off doing like a guided meditation with them, and then she was kind of she also works as a yoga teacher, and I felt like the way that she was conducting these kind of exercises, getting the teachers to make and play with the materials was like in this very kind of yoga embodied, like intuitive way. And so you can see some examples of the teachers play with materials on the right there. So again, we also gave teachers different resources and suggestions of how they could set it up in the classroom, different like visual references for different tools that they could source and use. And then we brought it into the classrooms for the kids to play with. And the teachers were extremely creative in how they navigated, like doing like something that's like a very messy play activity in often like very small spaces, like how they utilize different like tables and outdoor areas to kind of like house these projects in. Okay, so as the project is still in motion, we are still finalising and working on our analysis that we hope to share more concretely and in July. But we are looking at some of the key emergent themes that have come out of this work. So the first one being the need for teachers to have professional development opportunities where they have direct experience making, playing and creating with the materials and doing those classroom activities themselves and experiencing the joy of creating and making and then bringing it out into the classroom. Something that can be really tricky in being an early childhood educator is that you are expected to teach the entire curriculum. You are not just the visual art teacher, you know, as is like, you know, in a high school. You're having to teach everything. So a lot of these folks don't necessarily have a background in art. And so giving opportunities for teachers to make and play with different materials and build that confidence and knowledge of different artists, of different art techniques, different ways they can set it up and adapt it in the classroom, that is all like incredibly critical food for thought for when it comes down to the rubber hitting the road and them having to actually facilitate these activities in the classroom. All right, so also thinking about the interaction between these really experimental, playful art experiences and the standards, like the learning standards, the Massachusetts state learning standards, for example, here. So that these things do not exist as oppositional to one another, that there is opportunity and there is possibility to bring them together. And so that they're not detracting from one another, but they can actually be both used to support and expand learning. So there are a lot of opportunities to do that. Something that is unique about the education system in America is that every state has its own set of standards, which is really different to other countries like England or France or Australia that has like a national standards, national curriculum. The US is really different. in that sense, in that it's much more fragmented. But these are still standards that we can work with and that we can think about how they intersect with the arts. And also the partnership between schools, art museums and artists are essential in facilitating sustainable arts education practices, in classrooms. And we heard this repeatedly in the interviews from teachers, them saying, well, I need to, in order to develop and facilitate these activities with kids, I need to develop my knowledge of artists. So I need to be going to the museums and I need to be, playing and making with these materials, and these workshops need to be happening with different artists, different creative professionals that bring that expertise around materials and different media. And at the same time, the museums were really interested in engaging with the children and with the teachers because in the public school system, because that's where a lot of the diversity lies. These are schools that already have really embedded relationships with the community. And so it just makes sense to be thinking about how they facilitate those relationships even more. So as I mentioned, we're in our final stages of doing our final analysis now, and we're really excited to extend those findings with everyone else when they do come out. We're currently in the process of building a website on the Project Zero platform. So if you would like to stay in touch, my favorite thing in the world is connecting with other people who are really passionate about integrating the arts into children's and young people's lives. So here is my email address, and I hope you enjoy the conference, and I hope that I get to meet some of you in person sometime soon. Bye.
네, 감사드립니다. 보스턴 공립학교의 학생들을 위해서 다양한 미술관이나 기관들과 협력하여 이루어낸 파트너십의 중요성, 또 그것들을 구조화해 나가면서 공립학교 교사들이 실제로 프로그램을 활용할 수 있도록 모델화 시켜가는 부분에 대한 얘기 주셨는데요. 마지막에 말씀 주신 것처럼 이메일로 직접 답해 주셔도 되고, 또 저희 쪽으로 주시는 질문들은 모아서 또 답변 드릴 수 있도록 준비할 예정이니까요. 참고해 주시면 감사하겠습니다. 오늘의 마지막 순서입니다. 아마 이제 미국과 독일의 이제 여러 사례를 저희가 나누어 봤는데요. 이번에는 한국의 발제로 미래 세대의 학습과 돌봄을 위한 예술교육 실천 사례와 당면 과제라는 제목으로 한국문화예술교육진흥원 김재순 학교예술교육 본부장님을 모시고 발제 내용 들어보도록 하겠습니다. 큰 박수로 부탁드리겠습니다.
네, 안녕하세요. 방금 소개받은 김재순이라고 합니다. 지금까지 미래 세대를 위한 문화예술 교육의 실천과 현장 강화 관련해서 미국과 독일의 각 기관에서 좀 진행하고 계시는 문화예술 교육의 사례를 다양한 이미지와 영상을 통해서 좀 생생하게 저도 좀 확인해 볼 수 있었는데요. 지금부터는 저희 미래 세대를 위한 한국의 학교에서 진행되고 있는 문화예술 교육의 현황과 향후 방향에 대해서 좀 얘기를 해 보려고 합니다. 앞에 좀 4가지 주제로 다소 좀 시간도 걸리고 이미지와 좀 영상도 있어서 그나마 좀 집중 있게 볼 수 있었을 텐데, 저는 이제 좀 문화체육관광부와 한국문화예술교육진흥원이라는 정부 기관에서 하는 정책 사업에 대한 소개니까 좀 결이 다르긴 하겠지만 어쨌든 한국에 대한 고민을 공유한다는 차원으로 이해해 주시면 감사하겠습니다. 네, 먼저 미래 세대 담론에서부터 좀 출발을 해보려고 합니다. 미래 세대와 관련된 주요 담론은 디지털 시대의 전환과 급격한 환경 변화에 직면한 상황으로부터 출발을 합니다. 21세기에 들어서면서 인공지능, 빅데이터, 클라우드, 가상현실, 로봇, 사물 인터넷으로 대표되는 새로운 기술 중심의 4차 산업혁명이 시작되었습니다. 기술의 급속한 발전은 우리의 삶을 변화시키고 있습니다. 날마다 새로운 정보가 쏟아지고 또 새로운 정보는 다른 정보로 재생산됩니다. 정보기술의 발달로 누구나 필요한 정보를 언제 어디서든 쉽게 얻을 수 있게 되었습니다. 이러한 변화에 교육의 역할도 더 이상 기존에 정형화된 지식과 암기는 가치를 잃어가고 있습니다. 또한 우리가 모두 경험한 코로나19로 인한 재난 상황과 그로 인한 변화들은 우리에게 새로운 현실을 마주하게 하였습니다. 빈곤과 불평등, 생태계의 변화, 그리고 특히 한국은 그 인구 감소와 지역 소멸이라는 변화도 현재 진행되고 있는 현실입니다. 미래 세대를 위한 교육의 국제적 담론은 이러한 다양한 환경 변화에 대응하기 위한 새로운 교육의 필요성을 강조하고 있습니다. 2020년 세계 경제 포럼에서 발표된 미래의 학교에서는 그 초중등학교 시스템이 미래를 위한 교육으로 변화가 필요함을 강조하였고, 유네스코 국제 미래교육위원회도 2021년에 발간한 교육의 미래 보고서를 통해 인류 공동의 도전 과제에 대응하고 상호 의존적인 미래를 만들기 위해 교육을 시급히 재창조해야 한다고 언급하고 있습니다. 그 세계 경제 포럼에서 제시하고 있는 새로운 교육 모델을 좀 구체적으로 살펴보도록 하겠습니다. 세계 경제 포럼에서는 제4차 산업혁명 시대 초중등 교육의 새로운 교육 프레임워크로 교육 4.0 모델을 제시하며 8가지의 핵심 요소를 다음과 같이 제시하고 있습니다. 미래교육이 제공해야 하는 경험으로서 맞춤형 자기주도 학습, 접근 가능한 포괄적 학습, 문제 기반 협력 학습, 평생 학습과 학생 중심 학습을 제시하였습니다. 그리고 미래 교육을 통해 함양해야 할 역량으로 세계 시민 역량, 디지털 역량, 혁신 역량과 창의력, 대인 관계 역량을 제시하고 있습니다. 이러한 교육의 경험과 역량 요소는 변화하는 사회에 아동 청소년들이 더욱 포용적이고 생산적인 세상을 만들어갈 수 있는 미래 인재로 잘 적응하기 위한 요소라고 할 수 있으며, 앞으로의 교육은 이러한 요소를 중심으로 교육 시스템을 업데이트하는 것이 중요하다고 할 수 있습니다. 한국의 교육 정책에서도 이러한 미래 대응 방향에 대해서 준비를 하고 있는데요. 교육부에서는 2021년에 국가 교육 과정을 개정하면서 미래 사회 변화에 대응할 수 있는 역량을 체계화하여 학생의 삶과 연계한 맞춤형 교육을 강화하는 것을 주요 방향으로 제시하였습니다. 이를 위한 핵심 역량으로 자기 관리 역량, 창의적 사고 역량, 협력적 소통 역량, 지식정보 처리 역량, 심미적 감성 역량, 공동체 역량을 제시하며 학생들이 교과 및 창의적 체험활동과 연계하여 체계적이고 실효적인 학습이 가능하도록 교육과정을 개정하였습니다. 또한 2023년에는 그 디지털 시대의 변화에 대응하는 교육 혁신 방안을 발표하기도 하였습니다. AI가 대체할 수 없는 인간의 고유한 창의성과 비판적 사고, 인성과 협업 능력을 키울 수 있는 교육의 강화와 학생이 자신의 학습 목표와 역량, 속도에 맞는 맞춤형 교육을 받을 수 있는 체계를 만들겠다는 것입니다. 이를 위한 주요 과제로 AI 디지털 교과서의 개발, 디지털 역량 교원 연수 및 교수 학습법 개발, 디지털 선도학교 운영을 제시하였습니다. 그림에서 보시는 것처럼 앞으로의 학교 교육은 교사 1인이 주도하는 대량 학습 체제가 아니라 디지털 기술을 활용한 학생 개개인의 여건을 고려한 맞춤형 1:1 교육으로 전환해 나가는 게 한국 교육 정책의 방향이라고 할 수 있습니다. 문화예술교육 영역에서도 이러한 미래 변화에 대한 대응을 하고 있었는데요. 2021년에 유네스코 회원국 집행 이사회를 통해 급변하는 국제 정세에 부응하며 문화예술교육의 국제적 옹호와 지지를 위한 새로운 프레임워크 개발을 의제화하였습니다. 특히 한국 정부에서는 2022년 5월 세계문화예술교육 주관 행사와 연계하여 유네스코 국제 전문가 회의를 개최하며 프레임워크 개정을 위한 컨셉트 노트가 작성되었고, 이후에 다양한 소통 채널을 통해 한국의 문화예술교육 정책 현안과 주요 의제가 전달될 수 있도록 하였습니다. 2023년 5월에 개최된 유네스코 다자회담에서는 한국 문화예술교육 원장이 직접 디지털과 AI가 문화예술교육에 미치는 영향과 혁신의 가능성을 제안하기도 했습니다. 2023년 하반기에는 유네스코 사무국에서 프레임워크 초안에 대한 회원국의 의견 제출을 요청하였는데, 한국에서는 국내 문화예술교육 분야 전문가와의 논의를 통해 K-문화예술교육 리포트를 제작하여 디지털 기술 발전의 대응 등 프레임워크 주요 사안에 대한 세부적 권고와 문화예술교육 활성화에 대해 제안하였습니다. 이러한 한국 정부를 포함한 각국의 노력으로 2024년 2월 제3차 세계 문화예술교육 대회에서는 유네스코 문화예술교육 프레임워크가 정식으로 채택되었습니다. 문화적 다양성의 가치와 비판적 참여 역량, 지속가능한 미래 구축 역량, 디지털 리터러시 지원과 디지털 기술의 문화예술교육 활용 등 7가지의 핵심 의제가 담겨 있으며 앞으로의 프레임워크 이행과 고도화를 위한 각국의 실천으로 이어질 것입니다. 다음으로는 한국의 아동 청소년을 위한 학교 문화예술 교육의 추진 현황을 살펴보도록 하겠습니다. 한국의 학교 문화예술 교육 정책 사업은 2000년부터 시작이 되었습니다. 첫 사업은 학교 교육 과정 중에 음악 수업에 국악 강사를 지원하는 방식이었습니다. 음악 수업은 음악 교과서의 내용은 서양악과 국악 과정으로 구성이 되는데요. 국악의 전문성을 가진 예술가가 수업에 참여함으로써 교육적 효과를 높일 수 있도록 지원한 것입니다. 이렇게 외부의 예술가가 학교 수업에 참여하는 방식은 점차 확대되어 왔는데요. 현재는 국악뿐만 아니라 연극, 무용, 영화, 공예, 사진, 디자인, 만화, 애니메이션 등 8개 분야로 확대하여 지원하고 있습니다. 초중 고등학교뿐만 아니라 장애인 대상 특수학교에까지 지원을 하고 있는데요. 매년 학교에서 원하는 예술 분야와 교과 유형 그리고 수업 시간에 따라서 저희가 맞춤형 예술 강사를 지원하고 있습니다. 학교의 그 예술 강사를 지원하는 사업은 최근 10년간 총 9,450억 원의 예산이 투입되었고 누적으로는 총 2,766만여 명의 학생들이 참여하였으며 매년 8개 분야에 약 5천여 명의 예술 강사가 참여하고 있습니다. 학교의 그 문화예술 교육에 대한 수요는 지속적으로 증가를 했고요. 오른쪽 표와 보시는 것처럼 10년 전과 비교하여 신청하는 학교는 18%가 증가하였습니다. 현재는 전국에 있는 초중 고등학교의 70%가 이 사업에 참여하고 있는 상황입니다. 학생들의 만족도는 연평균 100점 만점으로 90점 정도로 매우 높은 수준으로 확인되고 있습니다. 두 번째 소개해드릴 사업은 예술꽃 씨앗학교 지원 사업입니다. 이 사업은 2008년부터 시작이 되었고요. 농산어촌 등 전국의 문화 소외 지역에 있는 소규모 학교 학생들이 참여하는 문화예술 교육 기반의 프로젝트입니다. 학교에서는 음악이나 뮤지컬, 미술, 미디어 등의 예술 장르를 선택하게 되고요. 전교생이 참여하는 프로그램을 기획, 운영하고 지역 주민들과 함께하는 마을 축제형 행사까지도 개최를 하고 있습니다. 2023년까지 총 174개 학교에 약 8만여 명의 학생들이 참여를 하였습니다. 예술꽃 씨앗학교를 지원받게 되면은 그 학교는 최대 4년 동안 지원을 받을 수 있고요. 국가 단위의 지원이 종료된 후에는 기업의 후원금을 통해서 자생력을 갖출 수 있도록 추가적으로 지원을 하기도 합니다. 예술꽃 씨앗학교 사업은 2024년부터는 문화 취약 지역의 문화예술 교육을 지원하는 사업과 연계하여서 지속적으로 진행이 되고 있습니다. 이 예술꽃 씨앗학교 사업 중에 2023년에는 저희가 새로운 모델 개발을 시도하기도 했습니다. 반기문 재단과 협력하여 유엔의 지속가능 발전 목표인 SDGs를 미래 세대를 위한 예술 기반 교육 모델로 개발을 하고자 시도를 하였습니다. 2023년에 진행된 프로젝트는 지속가능 발전 목표 중에서 지속가능한 소비와 생산이라는 주제를 음악이나 연극, 미술 등 문화예술 교육 프로그램으로 기획해서 실제 가정이나 학교의 음식물이나 폐기물이 감소하는 효과도 확인할 수 있었습니다. 2023년에 진행됐던 이 프로젝트는 2024년에는 저희가 기업 후원금을 확보를 했고요. 확보한 후원금을 토대로 인도네시아 등 해외 모델로 좀 확산해 나갈 예정에 있습니다. 세 번째로 소개해드릴 사업은 주제 중심 학교 문화예술 교육 사업인 예술로 탐구 생활입니다. 앞서 소개한 학교의 분야별 예술 강사를 지원하는 방식은 장르별로 1인 강사가 좀 지원되는 방식인데요. 이 예술로 탐구 생활이라는 프로젝트는요. 교육 기획 단계부터 학교의 교사와 최소 2인 이상의 예술가가 팀을 구성해서 학교별 환경과 학생의 수요를 고려한 교육 주제 선정과 커리큘럼 개발까지 공동으로 진행하도록 하고 있습니다. 특히 미래 교육 환경에 맞춘 프로그램을 강조해서 예술과 기술 간 융합 방식을 적극적으로 도입을 하고 있습니다. 이 사업은 4년 동안 750여 개교 4만 명 이상의 학생이 참여하였습니다. 학생들의 만족도도 높았고 디지털 기술 활용 등 새로운 교육 방식을 고민하고 있는 학교 선생님들의 매우 높은 만족도도 확인할 수 있었습니다. 예, 요 지금 보이는 사진은 그 예술로 탐구생활 프로젝트의 사례 중에 하나인데요. 해당 프로젝트는 연극과 미디어 아트, 그 다음에 메타버스 기술이 융합된 프로젝트였습니다. 기술의 발전에 따른 가상 공간에서의 범죄를 연극을 통해 경험하며 가상 세계에서의 범죄에 대해 학생들이 스스로 탐구해 볼 수 있도록 진행한 프로젝트입니다. 학생들은 메타버스로 구현된 가상 공간을 통해 교육 주제를 탐구하고 새로운 경험과 공동의 성찰을 해볼 수 있는 시간을 가지게 되었습니다. 이러한 방식 외에도 미술과 인공지능을 접목한다던가 국악과 무용, 메타버스를 연계하는 등 다양한 방식의 프로젝트가 이 사업에서는 진행되고 있습니다. 다음 네 번째 소개해드릴 거는 지역의 그 문화예술 자원과 연계해서 진행되는 문화예술 교육 사업인 예술로 링크입니다. 예술로 링크는 지역별로 저희가 학교 문화예술 교육 코디네이터를 지정을 하고요. 그 코디네이터가 지역의 다양한 자원과 학교를 연결해주는 역할을 하는 방식입니다. 지역에 있는 그 학교가 직접 지역에서 예술가나 문화예술 전문 단체, 시설을 다양하게 찾기는 쉽지가 않습니다. 그래서 지역의 문화예술 자원에 대한 충분한 정보를 보유한 코디네이터가 학교가 원하는 프로그램을 확인하고 거기에 적합한 인적, 물적 자원을 연결해 줌으로써 학교가 보다 원활하게 문화예술 교육을 진행할 수 있도록 지원하는 프로젝트였습니다. 마지막으로 소개해드릴 사업은 늘봄학교 문화예술교육 지원 사업입니다. 늘봄학교가 뭔지 좀 생소하신 분들이 계실 텐데요. 늘봄학교란 그 학부모들의 좀 양육 부담을 덜어주기 위해서 국가가 지원하는 돌봄 체계라고 할 수 있습니다. 작년부터 좀 시범으로 시작을 했고 올해에 본격적으로 지금 진행이 되고 있는 돌봄 체계입니다. 초등학교 학생들이 정규 수업 시간 외에도 학교 안에서 수업을 시작하기 전이나 수업 종료 후에 돌봄 프로그램에 참여할 수 있도록 하는 것이고요. 이를 통해서 학부모들의 경력 단절이나 사교육비 부담을 완화하고 아이들에게도 정규 수업 시간 외에도 양질의 놀이 체험 프로그램을 통해 성장 발달을 지원하는 체계라고 할 수 있습니다. 늘봄학교는 올해 초등학교 1학년을 시작으로 2026년부터는 전국의 모든 초등학교의 전 학년이 이용할 수 있도록 확대될 예정입니다. 한국문화예술교육진흥원은 이러한 늘봄학교 시스템 중에서도 학년별 맞춤형 프로그램을 제공하는 역할을 담당하고 있습니다. 앞서 소개한 예술로 링크 사업의 지원 방식을 발전시켜서 지역별 전담기관을 지정하고요. 그 지역의 예술대학이나 단체, 예술가와 연계하여 다양한 유형의 프로그램을 개발합니다. 그리고 학교가 전담기관에서 개발한 프로그램 중에 선택을 하면은 해당 프로그램을 진행할 수 있는 강소를 학교로 지원을 하고 있습니다. 이러한 늘봄학교의 프로그램은 지역기관과 연계하는 방식 외에도 한국문화예술교육진흥원이 보유한 노하우와 네트워크를 활용한 특화 프로그램도 지원을 하고 있습니다. 진흥원에서 10년 이상 추진하면서 개발해온 우수한 프로그램을 초등학교 1학년 맞춤형으로 재가공하여 지원하고 또한 저명 예술가와 협업을 통해 마스터 클래스를 개발하여 온라인 콘텐츠로 가공해 제공하고 있습니다. 앞으로는 국립중앙박물관이나 국립국장 등 문화예술 전문기관과 협업을 통해서 우수한 프로그램을 개발하고 강사진을 양성해서 전국의 늘봄학교에 수요가 있는 학교에 다양한 프로그램을 지속적으로 지원할 예정입니다. 네, 지금 요거는 늘봄학교 저희 문화예술교육 프로그램의 사례인데요. 지금 이때 진행된 프로그램은 환경과 생태를 주제로 한 그 시각예술 프로그램이었습니다. 기후 위기 시대에 미래 세대 아이들에게 스스로 실천할 수 있는 행동을 알아보고 작품으로 표현하는 수업이었는데요. 이날 수업에서는 지구를 사랑하는 마음을 담은 포스터를 만들어보는 시간이었는데 보시는 거에서 왼쪽에 지금 아이가 그 학교 앞에 건물에 서서 자기 포스터를 좀 들고 있는 모습입니다. 기후 위기에 대해서 자기가 배운 거를 자기만 알면 안 되겠다. 그 수업 끝나고 집에 가는 아이들도 볼 수 있게 하겠다고 해서 스스로 학교 앞 현관에서 저렇게 자기가 만든 피켓을 들고 쭉 서 있었다고 합니다. 사실 초등학교 1학년이면은 그 아직 뭐 지구, 기후, 환경에 대해서는 잘 모를 수도 있는 나이일 텐데요. 문화예술 교육을 통해서 이렇게 좀 자연스럽게 놀이와 체험으로 그런 것들을 체득하고 또 스스로 실천하는 작은 사례여서 한번 소개를 해드립니다. 다음은 한국의 그 학교 문화예술 교육, 지금까지 5가지의 사업을 소개해 드렸는데요. 그러한 사업이 20년 동안 진행되면서 주요한 성과들에 대해서 간략하게 짚어보도록 하겠습니다. 보시는 표는 그 매년 진행을 해서 조사하고 있는 학교 문화예술 교육 프로그램에 참여하는 학생들을 대상으로 효과성을 조사한 결과입니다. 2022년과 2023년의 조사 결과를 비교한 자료인데요. 보시는 것처럼 대부분의 지표가 전년 대비 효과가 상승하는 것을 보실 수 있습니다. 특히 미래 세대를 위한 교육에서 강조하고 있었던 역량과 관련된 공감과 소통 능력, 그리고 창의력, 그 다음에 문제 해결력 등의 지표에서도 상승하는 것을 볼 수 있는데요. 그만큼 문화예술 교육이 아동 청소년 대상 교육에서도 일정한 효과를 발휘하고 있는 것을 보실 수 있습니다. 문화예술 교육의 효과성 지표 외에도 크게 좀 3가지 지점에서의 성과를 볼 수 있습니다. 첫 번째는 보편적인 교육으로서 아동 청소년 대상 문화예술 향유 기회를 확대했다는 것입니다. 앞서도 설명드렸던 것처럼 한국에서의 학교 문화예술 교육은 매년 전국 학교의 70% 이상의 비율로 학교에 지원이 되고 있고 연평균 250만 명의 학생들이 참여하고 있습니다. 앞서 효과에서 말씀드린 것처럼 실제 창의력이나 소통 공감 능력에 대한 효과도 향상되는 것을 확인할 수 있습니다. 두 번째는 디지털 리터러시 향상을 위한 기술 기반 융복합 교육 콘텐츠의 지속적인 개발과 지원입니다. 앞서 사례로 소개해드린 것처럼 AI나 메타버스 등 기술과 예술을 접목한 프로그램을 지원하고 교사와 예술가 대상으로도 기술 활용 역량 강화 연수를 제공하고 있습니다. 세 번째는 국가 돌봄 정책과 연계한 지원 체계를 구축한 것입니다. 늘봄학교의 수요를 고려한 맞춤형 프로그램을 지원하고 앞으로도 특화 콘텐츠를 지속적으로 개발하여 전국 단위로 지원할 계획입니다. 네, 좀 마지막으로 이제 말씀드릴 부분인데요. 이제 한국의 학교 문화예술 교육의 미래 전환 방향에 대해 고민하고 있는 지점을 공유드리고자 합니다. 올해는 한국 정부가 학교 문화예술 교육을 정책으로서 시작한 지 25년째 되는 해입니다. 그리고 내년이면 한국의 문화예술 교육 정책 전문 기관인 한국문화예술교육진흥원이 설립된 지 20주년이 되는 해입니다. 앞으로의 한국의 학교 문화예술 교육 정책은 크게 2가지 측면에서 미래 세대를 위한 문화예술 교육으로 방향을 가져갈 예정입니다. 첫 번째는 다층적인 협력 체계의 내실화와 국내외 유관기관 협력 강화를 통한 문화예술 교육 범주의 외연을 확장하는 것입니다. 기존의 학교 문화예술 교육의 추진 방식은 보시는 표에 그 오른쪽에 색깔로 표시된 정부 및 교육 관계자와의 협력 체계를 중심으로 학교 현장에 직접 그 프로그램을 지원하는 방식으로 진행이 되었습니다. 국회 및 정부 부처, 교육청과 협력하여 정책의 중장기 방향과 종합 계획을 수립하고 공동으로 재원을 마련하였습니다. 그리고 학교 교사, 예술 강사, 그리고 지역 운영기관과는 실제 학교에 지원되는 문화예술 교육 프로그램의 안정적인 운영을 위해 협력해 왔습니다. 앞으로는 이러한 직접적인 프로그램 공급을 위한 협력뿐만 아니라 문화예술 교육의 질적인 고도화와 생태계 활성화를 위한 협력 체계도 강화해 나갈 예정입니다. 예술계의 다양한 조직과 대학 등과 협력하여 콘텐츠를 개발하고 전문 인력을 양성한 것뿐만 아니라 기업과 연계한 문화예술교육 모델 개발, 국내외 전문 기관과 협력을 통한 우수 프로그램의 보급 확산 등 정책 기반 지원 외에 민간 영역으로의 문화예술교육의 자발적인 확산을 도모할 예정입니다. 두 번째 지향점은 미래사회 환경 변화와 학교 수요에 대응하는 전문 인력 양성 지원 체계와 플랫폼을 기반으로 한 공급과 수요 지원 체계를 구축하고 강화해 나가는 것입니다. 콘텐츠 측면에서는 앞서 말씀드린 것처럼 국내외의 다양한 조직과 기관과 연계 협력을 확대하여 R&D 기반 우수 학교 문화예술교육 프로그램 개발과 아카이빙을 통해 양질의 콘텐츠를 축적하고 보급하도록 할 것입니다. 또한 전문 예술 교육가를 상시 육성할 수 있는 연수 과정과 활동 영역의 확장을 지원하기 위한 컨설팅 시스템을 구축할 것입니다. 나아가 신규 정책 수요에 대응하고 디지털 기술 관련 융복합 혁신 역량을 개발할 수 있도록 지원할 계획입니다. 이러한 콘텐츠 개발과 전문 인력 양성을 통해 궁극적으로는 문화예술교육 플랫폼을 기반으로 미래 세대를 위한 학교 수요 맞춤형 상시 지원 체계를 구축하고자 합니다. 학교 문화예술교육 정책의 전문 기관으로서 문화예술교육 현장의 다양한 자원과 인력, 콘텐츠, 행정 체계를 통합적으로 연결하는 플랫폼을 통해 학교 문화예술교육과 관련된 현장 생태계가 자율적으로 활성화될 수 있도록 지원하는 역할을 해 나갈 예정입니다. 네, 어제 오늘 참여해 주신 각국에서 오신 기관들과도 이러한 협력을 앞으로 해 나가고자 하는 게 진흥원의 바람이자 계획이라고 할 수 있습니다. 네, 지금까지 급변하는 그 사회의 미래 세대를 위해 필요한 교육은 무엇이고 문화예술 교육은 어떠한 역할을 할 수 있는지, 그리고 한국에서 진행되고 있는 학교 문화예술 교육의 실천 사례와 앞으로의 방향에 대해서 얘기를 해 보았습니다. 네, 경청해 주신 여러분 감사합니다.
네, 그간의 학교 문화예술 교육의 변천과 여러 가지 사업들, 그리고 또 앞으로의 방향, 효과까지 말씀 감사합니다. 다시 한번 김재순 본부장님께 큰 박수 부탁드립니다. 질의, 그리고 또 저희 모더레이터 중심으로 토론 세션 진행하려고 합니다. 오늘 주제는 미래 세대를 위한 문화예술 교육 실천과 현장 강화였고요. 지금 앉아 계신 순서대로 첫 번째로 케네디 센터의 조던 라살, 그리고 피나바우시 센터의 베티나 밀스, 그다음에 전미 미디어 예술교육협회의 데인 올슨, 그리고 한국문화예술교육진흥원의 김재순 본부장님께서 발제해 주셨고요. 루이자 펜볼드 씨는 별도의 질의 주신 부분은 저희가 전달해서 사후 자료집이나 별도의 내용 안내 드릴 수 있도록 하겠습니다. 오늘 전체 좌장을 맡아주실 모더레이터님을 소개드립니다. 한양대학교 응용미술학과 김선아 교수님이십니다. 큰 박수로 맞아주십시오. 네, 그럼 시작 부탁드립니다.
네, 오늘 장기간 오후 시간에 자리해 주셔서 감사합니다. 너무 흥미로운 사례들을 많이 보다 보니까 정말 시간 가는 줄을 모르고 저는 듣고 있었던 것 같습니다. 간단하게 저희가 이제 저희 얘기보다는 플로어에서나 또 유튜브로 들으시는 분들 질문을 중심으로 이 토론을 진행을 하려고 하니까요. 혹시 궁금하셨는데 아직 질문 못 올리신 분들은 또 시작할 때 또 함께 올려주시면 최대한 많은 질문들을 다루어 볼 수 있도록 하겠습니다. 간단하게 생각을 좀 정리하실 수 있도록 제가 들었던 것 중에 기억에 남는 거 몇 가지만 이제 말씀을 드리고 본격적으로 토론으로 들어가려고 하는데요. 먼저 좀 거꾸로 마지막 하신 발표자 순으로 조금 올라가자면, 또 이제 한국 사회가 이제 변화하면서 우리가 학교가 그냥 변하는 것이 아니라 변화를 요구받고 있다고 생각을 합니다. 변하지 않을 수 없는 이제 그런 시점에 이르러서 문화예술 교육이 어떻게 거기에 반응할 수 있는지를 좀 구체적인 정책 사례로 말씀을 주셨고요. 또 그 루이샤 펜포드 교수님 영상에서는 제가 기억에 남는 거는 놀이가 교육 표준에 반대되는 것이 아니다. 그것이 교육 표준을 방해하는 것이 아니다. 우리가 항상 놀이와 학업을, 예술과 학업을 이분법적으로 대립관계에 놓고 보아왔기 때문에 그 생각부터 좀 극복을 하는 것이 좋겠다 하는 생각도 했고요. 또 데인 올슨 교수님께서 미디어를 하나의 투명한 미적 신디사이저라고 표현하셨습니다. 그래서 뭔가 그 미적인 결합을 이루는데 미디어가 어떤 역할을 할 수 있는지 저에게 잘 보여주신 것 같습니다. 그리고 조던 리사 교수님의 말씀에서는 저희가 그 가치를 어떻게 어떻게 보여지고 들려지게 할 것인가, 이것도 저희가 또 앞으로 같이 고민을 해 나가야 할 과제인 것 같고, 거기에 대한 질문들도 좀 올려주신 것 같아서 추가로 더 들어보도록 하겠습니다. 그리고 마지막에 베티남 밀스 교수님께서 말씀 주신 것 중에 미래의 예술 공간이 오늘 창조되어야 한다는 말씀이 참 많은 과제이자 숙제이자 또 굉장히 중요한 말씀으로 들렸습니다. 그래서 어쩌면 오늘의 예술 교육에서 저희가 미래를 생각하고 그려야 되는 시점이고, 미래를 또 준비하는 것이 저희의 과제라고 생각이 들기 때문에 오늘의 이런 작은 여러분들의 그 질문 하나하나, 또 오늘 이런 포럼 같은 자리들이 차곡차곡 미래를 만드는 일이 아닐까라고 생각을 하게 되었습니다. 그래서 제가 오늘 갖게 된 키워드는 이제 개방성, 오픈니스하고 그런 것들 중에서 포용성을 갖는 거, 그리고 연결, 파트너십도 말씀해 주셨고, 인터디스플리너리한 간학문적 접근에 대해서도 많이 말씀을 주셨고, 마지막으로 중요한 단어는 유연성인 것 같습니다. 플렉서블한 스페이스를 만든다. 이 경직된 학교를 어떻게 유연하게 만들 것인가, 우리 머릿속에 박혀있는 이 프로그램의 틀들을 어떻게 깨고 나올 것인가, 이제 이것이 오늘 저희가 찾아야 되는 하나의 답을 찾아야 되는 질문이 아닐까 생각이 듭니다. 먼저 그 질문을 올려주신 거에서 한 분씩 그 좀 내용을 조금 더 듣고 싶어 하시는 질문이 있으신 것 같아서 그거 먼저 묻고, 그 다음에 또 같이 토론해 볼 수 있는 주제들이 있으면 이어서 말씀을 나누도록 하겠습니다. 그래서 먼저 좀 질문에서 공통된 질문이 있어서 데인 올슨 교수님 선생님께 그러니까 질문이 올라왔는데요. 미디어 아트에 대해서 관심이 굉장히 많은데 지금 많은 우리 예술가들께서 그것을 교육에 접목하고 교육에서 실천하는 데 관심이 많으신데, 디지털 기기가 없다든가 그런 기술적 장벽을 넘어서 어떻게 미디어 아트를 좀 폭넓게 활용할 수 있을지에 대한 질문을 주셨습니다. 그래서 그 부분에 대한 혹시 경험이나 사례가 있으시면 조금 더 말씀 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
That's an excellent question. I don't know. Just kidding. When I first started teaching media arts, I had only 2 cameras, 2 video cameras, VHS cameras, big video cameras, and 2 editing bays, and I had 30 students. So I had to divide the class into groups, and they had to work in stages to produce videos. So this group over here was brainstorming and deciding what they wanted to produce. This group was working towards their script and deciding where they were going to shoot and drawing their storyboards. Another group was actually going out and shooting their material. So very little equipment there in the room, and I was able to manage that. It wasn't the best situation. What I showed you today was a very low-tech approach to media arts, where you can draw pictures on paper, you can create simple animations. I taught a whole animation class that was almost all paper-based. There were 2 cameras whereby you could take pictures of those images and then bring them into computers. And again, students can work in groups. I had classes where I had 5 computers, 40 students, again, breaking the students into groups. So if you have less equipment, you have teams of students in order to produce the work that they need to produce. Also, if you're using simple devices, you can use these devices that are already in schools. You have laptops perhaps that are available, and bringing those into the media arts classroom can work, as well as students using their own devices. I'm not sure about the rules in Korea, but oftentimes in the United States, it's a strictly regulated, no phones in the classroom. This might be an opportunity to look at flexibility, as we were talking about, and whether or not sometimes students could use their phones to produce. In my own classroom, more and more, I was using student materials and student devices in order for them to produce their work, and they actually sometimes preferred using those. So many different ways to work with media arts and integrate it. It's very adaptable, very flexible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 예. 네, 저희가 아마 다 갖춰진 다음에 할 수는 없는 것이고 같이 적응해 나가려는 아마 슈드들이 필요하지 않을까라고 생각을 합니다. 특히 학생들이나 학교 현장에 지금 가지고 있는 것을 가지고 출발할 수 있는 이제 그런 지점들을 찾아 나가야 한다고 말씀을 주신 것 같고요. 그러면 두 번째 질문으로는 베트남 선생님께 여쭤보겠습니다. 그 질문이 공간에 대해서 굉장히 저희가 새로운 상상할 수 있는 많은 자료들을 또 보여주셨기 때문에 이제 지역 사회 안에서 많은 문화 기반 시설들이 있는데 이 공간이 어떤 새로운 공간이 될 수 있는 어떤 방법이 있을지 거기에 대한 고견이 있으시면 말씀을 듣고자 합니다. 그러니까 완전히 새로운 공간들을 다 짓지는 못하더라도 지역에 있는 여러 공간들을 어떻게 이런 좀 더 창의적인 어떤 예술의 공간으로 바꾸어 나갈 수 있을지 그 부분에 대한 말씀을 부탁드리겠습니다.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, I think. I mean, artists have done this since a long time. Lucinda Childs has worked in New York in between the skyscrapers, and it's in a way not new, but also in a time where, of course, everybody, I hope, is asking him, herself, is it right to make a new building, even if it's a sustainable building, but it's a new building? So I am happy that we reconstruct an old building and add a new building, because like this we can put the solar collectors on the new building and which we are not allowed to put on a protected building. But still, I think I have to emphasize most of those work that I presented is done by artists. It's not my invention, but I'm just the catalyst between the institution and the artist. So work like Wundertal or Cercle by Boris Charmatz, the big work in the space in the city for around like 200 people on stage and maybe 6,000 people in the audience. That's one possibility. But I think there can also be much smaller works. And I think the public space is very interesting because especially after the pandemic, but already I think since 20, 30 years, there is this question, how do we want to structure the public space? And I think Germany did a quite good job in the pandemic giving money to artists, but most of us failed, I have the feeling, in creating public spaces where we can meet. If we bring a dead body to the earth, if we have a new child born, there were no solutions. And this showed for me a little bit that there's an urgent need to think about it. And dance, theater, visual art, video in the public space are just offers for people to come together and for real togetherness. So I think, yeah, there's a lot of spaces we can work in. It doesn't have to be a theater. It's very beautiful to work in a theater. It's very beautiful to work in an amazing space like this. It's very beautiful to make dance in a museum. But it can also be a garden. It can be a football place. It can be a street.
Thank you. 예, 그래서 아마 그 공공 공간, 공공 장소, 뭐 퍼블릭 스페이스라는 개념을 좀 다시 한번 잘 설명을 해주신 것 같은데요. 저희가 이 지역의 문화 기반 시설이나 여러 공간들을 공공기관이라고 하지만 많은 부분에서 저희가 좀 행정적인 공간으로 생각하는 경우도 많고 어디서 지어진 그냥 당연히 있는 곳으로 생각하는데 거기를 사람들이 만나고 모이는 곳으로 전환시켜야 된다는 말씀도 주셨고, 아마 그 지속 가능성, 새로운 공간을 지을 때도 지속 가능성을 생각하지만 기존에 있는 것을 지속 가능하게 만드는, 그러니까 사람들이 모임으로써 그것이 계속적인 공공의 공간으로서 기능할 수 있도록 하는 것도 또 굉장히 중요한 이슈가 될 거라고 생각을 합니다. Thank you very much. 조던 라살 교수님께 여쭤보겠습니다. 아주 브로드한 질문일 수 있을 것 같은데요. 우리나라에서는 이제 문화예술교육, Arts and Cultural Education이라는 용어를 쓰고 있습니다. 네, 이제 지금 발표해 주실 때 예술교육, 예술놀이, 참여형 예술 이런 것들을 굉장히 포괄적으로 많이 말씀을 주셨고, 그래서 그 용어의 측면에서 그런 맥락 안에서 교육이라는 표현을 쓰실 때에 또 어떤 범위 내에서 인식을 하시는지, 또 여기서 쓰여지는 교육의 의미, 그러니까 미국 같은 경우에서는 또 어떻게 사용이 되고 있는지 질문을 주셨습니다. 하나의 좀 우리가 어떻게 예술 교육을 정의할 것인가에 관한 질문인 것 같아서 굉장히 큰 질문이기는 합니다만, 아마 선생님께서 갖고 계신 아마 개념을 설명 주셔도 충분할 거라고 생각이 듭니다.
Okay, I will just take the next 2 hours and we will answer that question. Okay, no, it's okay. So I'll say within the scope of the Kennedy Center, because that's the lens that I'm applying here, arts education can take a very formal role in the school day. We do hope that part of what we consider to be accessible means not only for all different kinds of learners, but also that it is such a regular part of your education that you don't have to go out of your way to choose it. So that is part of the idea that arts education should be part of a regular education for all students across the country and world and everywhere. And then I think we tend to think about there are opportunities for those who are very arts interested to really deepen their experience and build their expertise in that art form. But even within those students, let's say you're very interested in dance and you want to be a dancer, when you come to our training program, you will be a better dancer by the time you come out of the program, but you will also be thinking about all of the different jobs that take place in the arts, all of the different health and wellness considerations that you need to have as a dancer, all of the different ways that you can be contributing back to your society through all different kinds of art forms. So that if you are a dancer professionally, wonderful, you're set. But if you're not, you can still be educated in the arts, and you can be an arts lover and a supporter, or you can have a career like many of ours in the arts, but not as a performing artist, and still be giving back to your society using art as your vehicle.
네, 그래서 아마 저희는 주로 말하는 그 예술교육의 보편성에 관련된 말씀이셨던 것 같고, 모든 교육 영역에서 예술이 따로 별도의 특별한 노력을 기울이지 않아도 접근 가능하게 만드는 노력과 함께 아마 말씀하신 것처럼 전문 예술인을 위한 어떤 특정한 아카데미나 기술이 아니라 그 전문 예술인의 삶 자체에 스며든 어떤 그런 예술의 속성, 뭐 건강이라든가 무용수가 가질 수 있는 여러 가지 삶의 측면에서 예술 교육을 한다고 말씀을 주셨던 것 같습니다. 네, 저희가 그 교육이라는 개념 안에서 예술을 정의하려고 할 때 예술만 새롭게 정의되는 것이 아니라 교육 또한 또 새롭게 정의되어야 하기 때문에 앞으로 이것도 저희가 지속적으로 찾아 나가야 되는 답이라고 생각이 들고요. 김지순 선생님께 특별히 온 것은 아니지만 아마 답을 주실 수 있을 것 같아서 질문을 드리면은 학교 안에서 또 예술 교육, 특히 예술 놀이 같은 것을 진행을 하려면 여전히 학교 안에서 선생님들이 갖고 계신 거부감이라든지 이제 예술가 분들이 가지고 계시는 그런 모든 활동들을 학교에서 실천하기에는 굉장히 어렵고 관계 맺기에 이제 문제들이 발생하고는 한다. 그래서 저희가 25년의 문화예술 교육을 해왔음에도 불구하고 여전히 또 풀리지 않는, 그러니까 풀어가고 있지만 쉽게 풀리지 않는 부분이기도 한 것 같은데요. 이런 외부라고 말하긴 그렇지만 또 학교 안에 들어가는 이런 예술가들이 학교 안에 들어가는 과정에서 겪게 되는 이런 관계 맺기의 문제에 대해서 혹시 좀 더 좋은 말씀을 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
네, 그 학교 문화예술 교육, 특히 이제 처음 소개해드렸던 학교 예술 강사 사업 같은 경우가 전국에 매년 한 8,000개 이상의 학교에서 매년 벌어지고 있습니다. 수업이. 정말 학교들이 인식이 바뀌어서 좋은 공간과 협조적인 분위기들로 많이 나아지고 있긴 하지만 여전히도 협조가 잘 안 되거나 하는 사례들은 빈번하게 발생을 하고, 그런 것 때문에 학교에 가셨던 예술 강사분들이 어려움을 토로하는 일들이 저희한테 많이 발생을 하고 있습니다. 사실은 제일 좋은 예술 교육을 위해서는 독립된 공간이 마련되고 그에 따른 교사도 협력적인 역할로 같이 참여를 해줘야 사실은 효과적인 수업이 되지만, 일부 교사들은 예술 강사가 오니까 내 수업을 대체해 주겠구나라고 하는 인식들을 간혹, 아주 적은 수지만 간혹적으로 하다 보니까 예술가가 혼자 수업을 하기 좀 어려움을 겪는 일들이 발생을 하는데요. 그런 부분들을 좀 개선하기 위해서 저희가 지속적으로 하고 있는 부분들은 역시나 그 학교 관계자들, 교사들과 이제 교장, 교감 선생님들이 인식을 좀 개선하기 위한 작업들을 펼쳐나가고 있고요. 아까 소개해드린 사례 중에 저희가 늘봄학교라고 하는 사례가 있는데, 늘봄학교 같은 경우는 학교 안에 수업 전용 교실 말고 별도의 공간을 확보하는 게 중요합니다. 근데 그게 좀 올해가 처음 시행되는 정책이다 보니까 아직 그런 공간이 확보되지 못해서 놀이형 수업을 하고 싶지만 갔을 때 다 책걸상 의자가 있다 보니까 그런 게 당초에 이렇게 세웠던 목표대로 수업을 진행하지 못하는 사례들도 있긴 합니다. 근데 여전히 그런 거는 결국은 학교의 관계자들 그리고 학부모들이 문화예술 교육이 중요하고 앞으로 이런 것들이 더 많이 도입돼야 된다라는 인식과 의견들이 개진돼야 바뀔 수 있는 부분이기 때문에 아까 말씀드린 것처럼 직접적인 지원 사업 외에도 계속 관계자들의 인식을 개선하고 알릴 수 있는 작업들도 병행하는 게 국가에서 해야 될 일이라고 생각을 하고 있습니다.
감사합니다. 저희가 미래 세대를 위한 문화예술 교육을 이야기하고 있는데요. 오늘 질문 주신 내용도 저희가 새롭게 개념 정의도 해야 되고 새롭게 공간도 만들어 가야 되겠고 또 어떤 새로운 매체들로 확장도 해 나가야 되고 또 새로운 협력 관계들도 맺어 가야 되는 그런 굉장히 4가지의 중요한 포인트들이 오늘 다루어지고 있는 것 같습니다. 마지막 질문은 4분께서 다 함께 이야기를 해주시면 좋을 것 같은데요. 저희가 미래를 이야기하지만 그것이 새롭다는 게 무조건 새롭게 다 없던 것을 옛날 것을 없던 것으로 하고 새로 만드는 것은 아니기 때문에 이제까지 저희들이 해왔던 것을 어떻게 그 성과들을 그 영향들을 그런 아웃컴과 임팩트를 저희 스스로도 분명하게 인식하고 또 이런 것들을 설득하고 또 이런 것들로부터 발전할 수 있는 방향성을 잡아갈 것인가가 굉장히 중요한 것 같습니다. 아까 말씀 주신 것처럼 이 가치를 어떻게 비주얼하게 할 것인가 설득력 있게 할 것인가가 굉장히 중요할 것 같은데요. 그런 측면에서 이제 각 국에서 혹은 이제 일하고 계신 기관에서는 어떻게 그런 프로그램의 성과들을 물론 굉장히 여러 가지 디테일이 있을 거라고는 생각이 들지만 그 성과들을 어떻게 아카이빙하고 그런 것들의 성과를 어떻게 명료화하고 또 예술 교육을 옹호하기 위한 방식으로 활용하고 계신지 그 부분에 대해서 한 분씩 말씀을 듣도록 하겠습니다. Jordan, can you go? Can you go first?
Okay. How to convince people of the value of the arts. So, one thing I would say is we could all benefit from more research in this area. And one of the things that I have learned from this visit is to really listen and ask of others what their research is that already exists, so we can use that across all of our different countries. Now that is about helping some decision makers who are inspired by research. That's a small group, probably. If you want people to be excited about it and see the benefits of it and feel something, then a research study alone may not be the answer. And instead, I think we lean into media education, and we lean into media the way we are all using it. If it makes me, as a grown adult, feel relaxed at night to scroll through my Instagram reels, you know, that's universal. So we can be using all kinds of social media. We can be using testimonials from artists. We can be showing how the programming that we design is connected to the people we want to reach. If we are willing to listen to what people are hoping for and adjust our programming in that way, then we should be able to respond and reflect that, you know, this is something that comes from you and then is delivered back to you. And I think that would be, I think that is inspiring to continue inviting people in that way.
Bettina Mills, could you?
Yeah, I was thinking about this feeling of always having to justify why art is so important. So I think this point of having more research is important. And when I listened yesterday and when I listened today, I had the feeling there's very similar questions in Finland, in the US, in Korea, in Germany. And it took some time to put the 17 sustainability goals into the mind of people. They were there for a long time, but maybe it's a good moment to put this UN convention really on the table and think together how to not convince, but it's so clear that we need other realities than Instagram, than all the commercial world surrounding us to solve the situation we are in. And so I would really like to get away from this, oh, how can we convince somebody that art is is important? Because as you said, I mean, all the sounds of our mobiles, they were discovered in contemporary new music. The visual tools in our computers, the image creating programs were created by artists making experiments with digital tools. So many things come from the arts, and it always looks like, oh, now the arts should use a little bit the new tools. So I think the art is an industry for the society. And it's a real good tool to get a global empathy, which we urgently need. So I think in a way it would be, I thought today and yesterday would be really good to find a common global base that we need really spaces to discuss values. And we need spaces to give space in our brain and our body and our soul to change this world. Otherwise, it will be really expensive if we don't do this, and we will get in a very difficult situation. So I think we should work on that art, the togetherness of art and science was always totally normal, and it was separated at a certain point. And I think we should get it together again.
I think as art teachers, we need to practice what we preach. Art is supposed to form creativity in our students, but oftentimes we are fearful of this disorganized, uncontrolled play. You know, too much play gets scary for teachers. You know, what's happening? You know, I'm not controlling what's going on there. So it's very much about control, and education is a very controlled kind of system. It's built to function like a machine. You know, it's based on a factory. Students sit still, they listen, they do what they're told. That's the first thing. So our teachers, as we saw, you know, break that mold. They allow students to play. So we're not talking about full-on play where you do anything you want. It's organized forms of play where, you know, you loosen the parameters. For example, when I teach drawing, the first drawings that we do is you can win this contest by making the worst drawing imaginable. Not the best drawing, the worst. And then you get a prize. $20 I'll give you if you have the worst drawing. And then the kids are like, huh? And then they're like, okay. And then they're like, okay, how do I make a bad drawing? And then as they go around looking, I'm doing, that's not bad. That's a good drawing. It needs to be worse. So what I'm saying is, a lot of times this is inverse thinking. How do you think outside the box? We need to show how we can do that in the arts. How can you think about the rooms that you're using in different ways? Are there different ways to organize students? Can students go outside of the classroom to do things? And in my classes, they can. They're allowed to go around the school. They're allowed to do research outside of school. They lead their own projects. They decide what they want to do. They manage the whole project. I basically sit on the side and coach and facilitate them. It's a totally different role. And it's an easier role. It's a less controlled role. And students need to learn to control themselves. You know, they need to learn how to organize and drive themselves and achieve goals. They're not learning those skills, which are 21st century skills, just by sitting and listening all the time. So let's think outside the box. Let's integrate more media arts is a good way to bring in this flexibility and adaptability that's necessary for 21st century learners and leaders. So that's it.
네, 그 문해예술 교육의 가치를 옹호하고 확장하는 거는 특히 한국문화예술교육진흥원 같은 정책기관에는 매우 숙명의 과제이고 다양한 시도를 해왔습니다. 그럼에도 불구하고 앞으로도 제일 물음표가 큰 과제이기도 한데요. 뭐 아까 발표에서 소개해드렸지만 사실 문화예술교육의 정책이 얼마나 중요하고 의미 있는지에 대한 부분은 매년 저희는 다양한 연구와 조사를 통해서 실질적인 것들을 검증해내고 알리고 있었습니다. 학교 문화예술교육에 대한 효과성에 대한 조사뿐만 아니라 잠재적 수요자들에 대한 수요 조사를 통해서 문화예술교육 원하는 사람들이 각계각층 전국에 이렇게 많기 때문에 더 확산을 시켜야 된다는 것도 있었고요. 그 다음에 당연히 만족도 조사뿐만 아니라도 정량적인 통계 데이터를 구축하면서 이제 이 부분들이 왜 필요한지를 저희는 알리는 작업들을 해오고 있지만 그럼에도 불구하고 문화예술교육과 좀 별개의 영역에 있는 재정당국이라든지 민간 영역에서는 여전히 좀 공감이 잘 안 되는 부분들이 제가 종종 확인을 합니다. 그래서 이것을 앞으로의 저의 바람처럼 정부 정책을 기반으로 한 부분뿐만 아니라 민간 영역에서도 자발적으로 좀 문화예술이 활성되기 위한 새로운 가치 그리고 새로운 가치를 알리기 위한 어떠한 전략이 저희에게도 좀 과제여서 아마 내년이나 내후년 다시 이런 자리가 생겼을 때는 짠 하고 한번 또 얘기할 수 있는 그런 계기가 있기를 바라봅니다. 네.
네, 감사합니다. 공식적으로 약속을 하셨기 때문에 네, 내년과 내후년에 진흥원의 좋은 결과를 기대해 보도록 하겠습니다. 아마 이 질문에 대한 답은 3가지 정도로 정리가 되는 것 같은데요. 이제 첫 번째는 결국은 저희가 프로그램을 하고 그다음에 아카이빙을 하고 그다음 효과성 조사를 하고 이걸 다 별개로 좀 생각을 해왔던 것 같습니다. 근데 이 세 가지가 어떤 연구의 측면에서 정말 무슨 일이 일어났는지를 우리가 연구하는 맥락에서 그런 관점에서 좀 통합해 내면서 지속적으로 다양한 방식으로 연구해 나가는 것이 이제 이런 아카이빙이나 이런 우리가 성과들을 축적해 나가는 굉장히 중요한 접근이 될 거라는 생각이 좀 들고요. 또 한편으로는 또 저희 이렇게 생각을 좀 거꾸로 뒤집어서 아까 말씀 주신 것처럼 예술의 가치를 우리 스스로 예술 안에서 좀 다시 찾고 그 예술이 갖는 그런 전복적인 그런 특징들 같은 것들을 학교 안에서 더 실천해 나가는 것도 또 하나의 방법이 될 거라고 생각을 합니다. 워낙 교육이라는 것이 하나의 통제적인 시스템이기 때문에 이런 것들을 조금 더 저희가 조직된 형태의 플레이, 놀이의 형태로 이렇게 바꾸어가는 과정에서도 그런 인식의 변화가 있을 거라고 생각을 하고 저희 스스로도 예술의 가치를 다시 한번 확인하는 지점이 될 것 같고요. 마지막으로 그런 것들이 이제 그런 어떤 국제적 또 지구촌의 차원에서 함께 이야기되고 공유될 수 있는 공간도 필요하고 그런 연대들이 저희들이 또 우리 내부적으로 가치를 옹호하는 것뿐만 아니라 국제적으로 같이 협력하는 과정에서 강화될 수 있는 부분이라고 생각이 들어서 말씀하신 것처럼 오늘 같은 이런 많은 자리들이 또 진흥원에서 계속 마련을 해주시고 저희들이 다양한 어떤 입장에서 다양한 역할을 갖고 참여하는 가운데 우리가 새로운 가치들을 발견하고 또 문화예술 교육을 확산하는 일들이 계속적으로 진행될 거라고 생각을 합니다. 저에게 남겨진 시간이 11초여서 내 시간을 잘 지킨 것 같습니다. 끝까지 참여해 주셔서 감사드리고 토론은 여기서 마치도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.